Hello there, and welcome to a very self-indulgent video on my part. Today, I am doing something quite a bit different than my usual videos, which are, primarily related to Fire Emblem, and I am tiering visual novels. If you don't know, I am an avid visual novel fan. I think a lot of people do know that. I've had a lot of Ace Attorney on my channel before I actually started taking YouTube seriously. My profile pictures on a lot of platforms is from Ace Attorney, so this is kind of just a little fun bonus video, I think. It's not really eating into my schedule for Fire Emblem or anything, so I just wanted to do it for several months now, so I'm kind of doing something for me. A few little ground rules before we really dive in. First of all, I'm not being super strict with the definition of a visual novel. I feel like a lot of VN players would take a look at this list and disqualify half of these. I just don't really care that much about being super strict on that. I actually added a few things that I explicitly know aren't VNs, like Detroit Become Human and Mouthwashing. I feel like they're both really narrative heavy games, and the tier list maker that I was using had Heavy Rain already, and I feel like Detroit is right alongside that. So really important note, spoilers. I am going to avoid spoilers as much as physically possible. If you don't want to hear anything about a game at all, it might be worth skipping the entry, but I'm going to try to keep plot points vague and just keep things focused on what I like, what I dislike, etc. Subjectivity. This is not me making any kinds of claims on what games are really good and what games are really bad. This is just how much I enjoyed them, right? Personally, I would like for this to be kind of a recommendation thing where somebody can see this and use it to find games that they want to play, so hopefully it works for that, but I am infamous for having really bad opinions. It is a known fact. People all the time on a lot of different servers I'm in use the term Dot's opinions because Dot's opinions tend to not be very good. So last note, I think this is the first unscripted video that I've done in a while. I will try to edit out any particularly egregious times when I can't think of anything at all and I'm totally blanking, but if I don't articulate myself very well, I'm not a very well-spoken human being. I tend to do better writing my thoughts on paper first and then speaking them, instead of speaking off the cuff like this. If there's anything that just doesn't make sense from what I say, if there's anything where I can't speak of something because of spoilers and you want to know more about my opinion, leave a comment, reach out on social media, Discord, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever. And I would be happy to expand on any of my thoughts for you so that hopefully it makes sense why I feel the way I do. So please just bear with me if I stutter and stumble a lot. I hope that it's gonna be not totally painful. So let us jump in with the first game on this list, and I have to say a really funny pick for the first game. Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium tells the story of the fictional city of Revachol. When a body is discovered there, two detectives are dispatched to the scene and tasked with investigating it. And what initially seems to be a pretty simple mystery turns into anything but, as there are a lot of different factors in play, there are a lot of different conflicting forces and ideologies that come into play, and things definitely go in some interesting directions, but obviously I can't go into too much detail in a non-spoiler format, so that's about all I can say. So as I kind of said out of the gate, Disco Elysium is a really funny pick for the first game because a lot of people would very explicitly argue that it isn't a visual novel at all. There's kind of some debate on if it's a CRPG, if it's a visual novel, or if it's something in between, and I kind of fall into the latter camp where I feel like it's just a pretty even split between a VN and a CRPG. It carries with it a lot of the conventions of CRPGs. It is kind of a CRPG in everything except for having combat. If you want to call it a CRPG without combat, that is pretty valid, but I do feel like storytelling is such a major component of it that I still very much do consider it to be at least partially a VN, so I think it's fine to count it, personally. In terms of its writing, I feel like Disco Elysium is pretty much top-notch at almost everything except for one fairly major aspect that I will get into a little bit more detail on later. But I feel like its characters are very strong. Even like the major characters are just absolutely top notch, and even the side characters are really good. Like even like characters that you meet in one quest and then never speak to again are still really memorable for better or worse. Some of them are kind of admittedly awful, like they're intended to be awful, like they're awful people, and that makes them really interesting characters, even if I would like hate them in person, but they are very, very memorable for sure. And I feel like Disco Elysium is really good at writing scenarios. I feel like so many of its side quests, even like very, very trivial ones, end up being really memorable. They go in interesting directions. A lot of them carry the conventions of CRPGs, where there are a lot of choices involved, and you can take quests in different directions depending on how you want to play your character and what kind of skills you have and what kind of things you've internalized. I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to spoil anything, but there are some very, very funny things that you can internalize for your character and that you can end up like utilizing later in quests. And it like, you can be a force of raw chaos if you want, or you can be like a really lawful cop who's trying to do things by the books, or somewhere in between. And you know, how you want to play it really plays into the kind of game that you're going to get. And I really enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun just seeing where things go and trying different options, and sometimes being a force of chaos, and sometimes trying to be a really good cop. And like, there are a lot of options that really like entice you. Like, it's calling to you to pick this option even though you know you shouldn't, but like you just want to see what happens, and the game is like really good at setting those up, and I love that. I also have to call special attention to its world building. I feel like Revachol is a really cool setting, and even the world beyond it is really interesting. I definitely recall a lot of the lore that you get as you explore, and like if you like research certain things, you get a little bit more lore on the world, and it was like so cool. Like I felt like it gave me a really comprehensive look at the world and the city, and yet it never felt like it was like giving me too much. Like it felt like it gave me just enough that it really like teased my imagination and made me want to like think about more and learn more, but it didn't like just give me the whole story. And even years after beating it, I really think back on that world and just how damn interesting it is, and like I really have to give it a lot of credit for that. So I feel like just so much of its writing is so good. Like its dialogue is some of the best out of any of these games, and I'm not even exaggerating. I feel like this is going to sound like an exaggeration because this game is first and I can like make very exaggerated statements like that, but I really do think that it is. Like I'm looking at the list as I speak, and I really feel like this has some of the best dialogue out there. Character wise, very top tier. Quests wise, scenario wise, lore, world building wise, all very, very good. What I will fault the game for, I think there are kind of two things now that I think about it. Like they're both like not deal breakers for me, but I do kind of have to call attention to them for the sake of like making a comprehensive list of my thoughts. So you may have noticed when I was like listing off all of the good things about the writing, I didn't really mention the main story. And I actually do think that that is kind of a weak point of the game, if I'm being totally honest, where it's not overtly bad by any means. Like it's perfectly fine. It's like a serviceable plot, but I do think that like in the grand scheme of things, when I compare it to the other games on this list, and like I said, I was just looking at all the games on the list and kind of mentally comparing them, I do think that Disco Elysium comes up a little bit short for me. I remember getting to the end of the plot, and like there were some cool twists, and there was like in particular like one really big twist that I was like really, really engaged with, but I remember just getting to the end and being like, oh, okay, is that it? Like, I guess that's the end of the plot. Well, okay, that was cool, and like, it's good. It's just not like mind-blowing, and I don't think that it hits the highs that most of the other games on this list do. The other thing is kind of a more personal thing. When I beat the game, I was really curious about just going back and picking other choices, and so to those ends, I actually started up a second run almost immediately after beating it, and I felt like that was actually kind of a mistake on my part, because I felt like when I compared how things played out from run to run, it felt a little bit too similar in some respects. I felt like some things were a little bit more on rails than I initially thought they were, and while it feels kind of harsh to criticize the game for that, I do kind of have to point it out as a flaw, because like beating the game twice in a row kind of burnt me out on it. that and kind of I regretted doing that second run so quickly. So if you have the same thought as me, if you like watch this video and hear me talking about how good Disco Elysium is and want to beat it twice in a row, space out your playthroughs, please, because I really don't think that the game is I don't think that it lends itself to replaying it like that quickly, but I do think that it is a good game to replay, just not like twice in a row like I did. But in the grand scheme of things, I just love so much of Disco Elysium's writing and just so many ways that it lets you take things in really interesting directions and lets you do what you want in these like really, really well-written side quests. I think that it is like a really cool game politically. I think that it has a lot to say about a lot of different political ideologies, and it doesn't really hold back, and I love that too. I love its characters, I love its lore, I love its world, I love its quests. I love how it kind of combines two games in a really unique and interesting way. Like, I don't think I've played another game like it. I'm sure that another game like it probably does exist if I were to like look for it. So I don't want to like say that it's like a one-of-a-kind game, but I do feel like it is very unique for what it is. And so while I do have my issues with it, I am going to go ahead and give it the first S tier, and I think it earns it. And if its main plot was just a little bit more memorable, a little bit stronger for me. And again, I want to emphasize that it's not bad at all. I just think that it could have been a little bit better. If it had been just a little bit stronger, I think that this would be an SS tier game for me, where I really feel like so much of it is so top notch. So definitely a really, really strong recommend to VN fans. I feel like this game kind of goes a little bit under the radar as far as VNs go. And no, I don't even want to say that. I retract what I just said. It doesn't go under the radar as much as I feel like VN fans kind of write it off as not being a VN and then ignore it on that basis. So it's not that it goes under the radar, it's more that it is known but is explicitly looked over because of its non-VN aspects. And I don't think that's fair to it. I really think that it's a great game, and I think that a lot of VN fans would get a lot out of it, so. Let's move on before I spend like 30 minutes on this. Hotel Dusk, Room 215. Another pretty unique game. Kind of a hybrid of a puzzle game and a VN, which, you know, that aspect isn't particularly unique. Admittedly, a lot of these do have puzzle elements. But you play as Kyle Hyde, a traveling salesman who shows up at a hotel with a lot of fucking secrets in it. Like, oh my god, there are so many secrets. Too many secrets. You spend the night investigating it and getting to the bottom of some mysteries that might involve your character a little bit. Again, that's about as far as I'm gonna go, as far as like my elevator pitch, because I don't want to spoil anything. This is actually another one, kind of funny that I like ordered these this way. I didn't really put much thought into the order for this, but this is another one in a row where it's a really good game, but I do have to admit that the main plot isn't really the draw here. Again, there is a main plot. Like there's a plot, there's a central mystery, there's a good resolution to it. I just find that resolving how the characters interact and intersect with each other and like how their different storylines go is more the draw here. I also want to call attention to the like stylization of Hotel Dusk. I think that the like art style for it is absolutely gorgeous. Even as a DS game, like several years later, it looks generally pretty good. Like obviously the 3D models have not aged well, but the like character sprites are just really good even years later. So huge recommend there. It is also a pretty short game, I will say. And that makes it a really easy recommend, especially if you get it through not most legitimate means. It's maybe like 10 to 15 hours, and I find a really good amount of the characters to be very well written within the game. I've just found that like learning about them was really interesting. I liked seeing their dynamics with each other and kind of seeing how these character stories overlap over time. And even though it doesn't have a really strong main story, that is like the central critique I will give it. I'll have to give it S tier as well. I will also say, just in the interest of fairness, the puzzles kind of suck at times. I can think of a few puzzles that just don't really like work very well. I actually recently saw a friend of mine like stream the game again, and that was a good refresher for me, and it was also a good reminder of like, oh, some of these puzzles are just like really not fun, but you know, most of them are fine, but a few of them do kind of like really suck, so heads up there. But fun breezy little game. Moving right along, the Zero Escape Trilogy. How the hell do you summarize these games without spoiling anything? That is the challenge that I now face. All three games feature casts of characters who get trapped in locations and they must escape. And that is the that is the only way that I can think to describe it without spoiling the shit out of it, because I feel like once you get into more details, you almost immediately hit spoiler territory. But I really don't want to. I don't want to like talk about plot details from the second two games because I feel like that immediately spoils a lot of things as well. So let's just summarize the series like that, and we're just gonna dive in. So when I first played through the series, which was pretty close to their release dates, I heard about 999 a few years after the fact, but it was still fairly close to its release, and then I got VLR like almost immediately on release. At that time, I preferred VLR of the two. I thought that it had the bigger twists, it took the bigger swings. That is still the case, but over time, I think I've come to accept that I think that 999 is the stronger game of the two, even though I'm putting both in S tier. I promise not everything is in S tier. You'll find that out very quickly. I feel like 999 is a really good atmospheric game. It has a lot of like tension behind it. It has a lot of kind of horror elements even. A lot of just darker parts, and VLR did tone that down a lot, which that was intentional. There's kind of this infamous story going around. I believe it is true. I haven't actually seen like a super firm source on it, but I believe it, that apparently 999 didn't do very well in Japan because audiences saw it as too scary, so they intentionally made VLR kind of more lighthearted. I think that works against VLR. I will say VLR still does have, like, it goes for bigger twists, it takes bigger swings. It is a very exciting game. I also think that its puzzles are a little bit better as a whole. Puzzles in all three games are solid. They are pretty good, like, escape room type puzzles, and I don't think that any of them are necessarily bad, but I do think that VLR probably wins as a whole, but I would probably have to replay all three games to like have like a really firm ranking on best to worst in terms of puzzles. But yeah, I think that 999 is ultimately the winner of the series for me, and VLR comes in a close second. I think that it is still a very good game, a lot of very good twists, a lot of very like fun moments. If you want a game that is just like all twists all the time, that is the series for you, because I think that the game like goes in some wild directions at times. Oh, you may have noticed that there's a third game in this series that I haven't talked about yet. Zero Time Dilemma. So unfortunately, Zero Time Dilemma was made on a budget of about $15 and some gummy bears. And how that manifested itself is that the game was like trying to be bigger and better and didn't have anywhere near the budget for that. It tried to be this like really cinematic Telltale type game while also being playable on the freaking 3DS, which like really limited the graphics and the animations that it could have. And you could kind of tell that the story was like, I don't know if it okay, here's where I'm like in the dark. I don't know if something got cut short with the story. I don't know if they weren't able to tell the story that they wanted to, but the main story just sucked in ZTD, and that is me being totally, like, as honest as I can be. Legitimately, I think anything that had to do with the main plot, or even a lot of the character writing, just fell super, super flat for me. Where ZTD avoids D tier, my bottom tier, I did feel like it did a good job presenting individual interesting scenarios, and that is a really specific thing to say, but there are things like the Monty Hall problem and Russian roulette, things that were really interesting in the moment, which were utilized in interesting ways within the game to present really interesting scenarios. I like that stuff. I think that stuff worked. I do actually, even though I kind of, just dunked on the characters a second ago, I do think that there are some good ones. I really like Mira. I know that she's very controversial. I know that a lot of people think that she's terrible. I personally think that she's an iconic girl boss, so, deal with it. Obviously, Carlos is hilarious. Some of the returning characters are a lot of fun, too. I'm not going to go into detail on those, just for spoiler reasons. But I do also think that the game has some really good, like, unintentional comedy, which it feels kind of funny to, like, credit the game for. But There are a lot of really funny moments, even though I don't think that the game is necessarily angling at that, so that's something. But very easily the black sheep of the series. Not really a great game, but just enjoyable enough to avoid my bottom tier. So sorry to ZTD fans if you exist. Let's move along with another hot take of mine. Well, I think this is the first really hot take. Steins Gate. So Steins Gate is a story about some high school age. I don't remember if they're in high school or like just past high school, but roughly high school aged kids who run a secret lab, and they are looking for the secret of time travel. Will they find it? I don't know. So Steins Gate. Let me contextualize this game and how I experienced it before I go into my full thoughts. Just suffice to say in advance, I'm not a huge fan of Steins Gate. So I had watched the Steins Gate anime before experiencing the VN. I loved the anime. It was there was a time whenever I would have listed it as a candidate for my favorite anime of all time. By now, I think that it's a little bit below that, but I still really enjoyed it. I had a blast with the experience. I thought it had a lot of really fun twists and turns. I thought it was an exciting story. I just really enjoyed it. So I was really excited to experience the Steins Gate VN. The problem, when I experienced the VN, I realized that the VN is the same story, but with a lot of, I don't even want to say unnecessary, but a lot of extra time spent on characters that I don't think necessarily developed them as much as focused on like a harem component. And I don't want to disparage harem stories, harem media, games, anime, whatever. If you're interested in that, that is totally fine. Enjoy it. Seriously. No issues with that. The problem is that I don't enjoy that. And so seeing all of this time being spent and it just feels like it's all for the purposes of like fan service, that really kind of tanked the game for me, if I'm being totally honest. I just kind of found myself like really, really bored by a huge stretch of the game because it was just kind of playing into this romance side that I wasn't really into, and I feel bad for like really like trashing on the game for that because like it is just my personal preference, but it just flat out did not land for me, and it was a pretty big part of the game. I would say that I would struggle to come up with a precise number, but it honestly felt like 30 to 40% of the game was spent on this harem thing, and I was just like so bored. I feel bad because Steins Gate is like a very revered VN, and I don't want to trash it, but I do think that there is a pretty significant component of it that just doesn't work for me. So what I'm gonna do, I think I'm gonna put Steins Gate in B tier. And that is kind of a compromise on my part because I think that a lot of the like main core story of Steins Gate is an S tier for me. But I think that if I were just playing like the harem side, like just all of the romance stuff, it would be a D tier for me. Like, I don't enjoy it. It's just, again, I really don't want to trash anybody who enjoys that kind of story. It's just not for me. So I think that putting it around the middle is probably the best compromise that I can think of, and I am sorry to Steins Gate fans because I know that it's very popular, and I do want to emphasize that I still think that the main storyline is very, very good. It's just, if you're not really into that romance kind of story, I would honestly vaguely recommend watching the anime because I think it tells the best parts of the story, in my opinion, and I think it does it well. But then again, I feel like if anybody played the VN first and then watched the anime, they might be like, oh, it cuts all the best stuff, it cuts all this and this and this, and so like I feel like the way that I approached Steins Gate is kind of unfair to it as a VN, and I really hesitate to critique it too much because of that, but I do want to be true to my feelings, right? Let us dive into a fun one and a long one. Ace Attorney! Spoiler alert, I am a big fan of Ace Attorney. I do not make that a secret at all, so I apologize if you're not a big fan of Ace Attorney, because I'm going to be ranting about these games a lot over the next few minutes. But Ace Attorney sees you playing as a variety of attorneys, usually Phoenix Wright, but often others as well, and solving a really wide variety of murder cases. Each game features between 4 and 6 cases depending on the game, and most of them are self-contained murder mysteries, with some of them kind of carrying over to other cases, and some of them having overlap between even games a little bit, not so much. Usually the games are kind of on their own, but there is a little bit between games. So I kind of made the executive decision to focus more on general thoughts about each game and then thoughts about the cases instead of talking too much about the individual plot lines of each game. Partially just for time, because I feel like talking about like 10 games worth of individual plots in the same series is like a little bit excessive, I think. But also because the main plot tends to come in like right at the end of the game, and like, you know, sometimes there are plot elements introduced early, but oftentimes the bulk of the story is in the final case or the final like 2 cases. And I really don't want to get too far into spoilers, so I feel like just kind of sidestepping the main plots for each game is probably ideal, especially for some of the later games where it's like really gets into a lot of plot like later on in the games. But the Ace Attorney series was actually my gateway into VNs. I remember hearing about it as a teenager, and just people were talking about like this game where you play as an attorney, and like it was getting some praise, but I was like, initially I was like very unsure about it. Like I was like, how could a game about like playing as an attorney be fun? Like that sounds so boring. Like it sounds like the most boring game ever made, but I kept hearing good things, and it just kind of piqued my curiosity. And eventually I remember like going upstairs and begging my mom to use her credit card and like ordering it online, and a few days later it showed up and I played it, and I was just absolutely hooked. Like so pulled into the game, and that really makes it kind of have a special place in my heart, just because it did introduce me to a genre that I really love. And obviously I have played a lot of VN since. Obviously it started a, you know, pretty long-standing interest in the genre. So let's just go game by game, starting with Ace Attorney 1. Ace Attorney 1, I am going to give this like a lower S tier. The funny thing about AA1 is that a lot of people will tell you that it's the best one in the series. Like a lot of, I don't even want to use this word because it sounds very like disparaging, but a lot of more casual players will swear by AA1 being the best one. To them, I say rebeat that game, because I think that AA1 has a lot of charm to it, but I also think that the series was very much figuring out what it wanted to do. It was figuring out what it wanted to be. If you replay it, there's a lot of like, it's both overwritten and underwritten at the exact same time. If you go and replay the first, like 1-1, if you go and replay 1-1, you will notice that there are some testimonies that go like 10 statements, and they're all like 1 sentence each, but you can press each one and like none of them have information. And that kind of is emblematic of the writing of the entire game for me, where it is so much different than the rest of the series, where it's so much simpler, yet also kind of struggles to make its points at times. And I want to emphasize, the game still has a ton of charm. I think that Phoenix versus Edgeworth is still like legendary within the series. Like iconic matchup, iconic pairing, iconic ship. Sorry, I had to. But I think like individually, like I will also say, I think that because AA1 has a bonus case 1.5, it was added after the initial release. About half of the game is 1.5, and so I think that a lot of your opinion of AA1 will come down to how much you enjoy 1.5. I personally have never been a fan of it. I feel like it has a lot of plot holes. I feel like it is a little bit overwritten. It does have some really good twists. It does have a really good emotional core. I think that the entire Emma-Lana relationship is very good, but I just feel like there's a little bit too much going on in 1.5, and it ends up kind of bogging itself down. And if you don't like that case, I mean, 1.1 is like legitimately 20 minutes long. 1.2 is about an hour. 1.3 and 1.4 have a lot more meat to them, but they are still relatively short compared to modern cases. And so every time I replay AA1, it just has such a different vibe than anything else in the series, and I still love it. I use the word charm because I think that is the most apt here, where you can tell they were trying something new, they were trying different ideas, and I think that a lot of them did work, but not all of them. So I think I'm kind of going in circles now, so let's go on to AA2, which is kind of the black sheep of the series, but I will be contrarian dots, I guess, and say that I think it's underrated. I think that it is a better game than AA1. For me, it just comes down to the fact that I think 2.2 and 2.4 are both top-tier cases. I think that 2.3 is a little bit underrated. I don't think that it is necessarily like a great case. I think that there are some aspects that people have problems with, and they are very legitimate problems, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there. But, you know, there are some like age-related issues that people have issues with, and if you have an issue with that, that is totally valid because it is very weird. And 2.1, very forgettable first case, but I think that 2.2 and 2.4 do carry AA2 quite a bit. And I will always insist that 2.4 is a, like, absolutely top-notch case, one of my favorites in the series. AA3, easy, SS tier, my best of the best super favorites. I love AA3. I am AA3-5 defender to the death. I think that every single case in AA3 is at bare minimum decent. 3.1, very good starting case. 3.2, 3.3, very good filler cases. 3.4. It's gotten some backlash in recent years, but I still think that it has a lot of really good emotional weight to it, and I just absolutely love it to death. So, and then 3.5 is, like, in my opinion, the perfect way to end out the trilogy. I think that it has a very good emotional climax to it. I can't make it through like the ending of that case without crying, and it gets me like every single time. So sorry to like I kind of feel like 3.5 has developed haters over time, where people think that it's like overrated because it's like always been the pick for the best cases in the series, and I found that some people have called it outright bad in recent years, and I just don't agree with it. I think that it's just a really good way to conclude a lot of different arcs, and I think that if you're playing through the trilogy, which by the way, heavily recommend buying the AA trilogy. It's available on pretty much every platform. It goes on sale for cheap, like 40 times a year, and it is excellent. If you're playing through the trilogy, I just find that it closes it out very well, and if the series had stopped there, which I'm glad it didn't, it would have been the perfect way to end it. So let's move on from the trilogy to the reboot with AA4. This is kind of getting into an interesting one for me. I remember when I got AA4. It's actually an interesting story. It's actually I needed my sister to drive me because it was like really far, but it ended up like snowing like really heavily, and so we ended up kind of stranded at this I think it was a Wendy's, and so I was just sitting there clutching my AA4 and Wendy's, watching this like blizzard conditions and being like, wow, I feel like a jackass. But then like she had business in that town anyway, so we, you know, it wasn't just me, but still. But anyway, I remember being so excited. I got my AA4, I played 4.1, I called my friend, I said, you have to play this. This might be the best game in the series. And unfortunately, I felt like the game kind of fell off a little bit after that point. With each subsequent case, I could kind of feel my excitement diminishing a little bit more and more. And I think that 4.2 is perfectly serviceable filler. I think that 4.3 is a mess. And I have a lot of issues with 4.4 as a case, but I don't want to get into too many spoilers here. So unfortunately, I do think that it peaks quite early. I will give AA4 a lot of credit for trying a new direction for the series. I think that it tried to be kind of a darker and more mature Ace Attorney. It tried to like hard reboot the series. I think that infamously Shu Takumi wanted it to be like totally disconnected and wanted it to be its own story. And then Capcom kind of gradually pushed him to put Phoenix back in. I'm not 100% sure on that. I would have to like verify that, but that is my interpretation of the events that I've heard. They tried. I don't necessarily know that it worked, but they tried. I do still think that like Ace Attorney at its worst is still a fun series for me. I just don't necessarily know that AA4 did a lot of the things that it wanted to do. And I will also say, I think that 4 has a lot of fans. I've seen a lot of people who like, I've actually seen more opinions recently of people calling it the best game in the series. Don't agree with that personally. Again, 4.3 and 4.4 just didn't quite land for me, but I do think that any Ace Attorney is good, so I'm going to give it an A tier. I still enjoy the game, I just think it's a little bit weaker as far as Ace Attorney goes. Speaking of weaker Ace Attorney, it is Dual Destinies. This is kind of where the series enters its I don't know what the fuck to do with myself arc, where you could kind of tell that like I believe that Shu Takumi had departed the series at this point. I don't think that he did 5, 6, or the Investigations games, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And you could tell that Capcom pushed Phoenix back into the series. They kind of moved away from what Apollo Justice was doing tonally, and unfortunately it didn't quite land for me. I find that the game is a little bit too far on the anime side for me. It just kind of feels a little cartoony, even by the standards of a series that is kind of very naturally over the top, right? 5-1 is a fine opening case. 5-2, I didn't enjoy it at all. 5-3 it's a decent filler case. It is like peak anime. 5-4 and 5-5 together make for an alright conclusion, but I do think that it kind of goes a little too far on the edgy side at times. I think it kind of like... I couldn't take some of the darker elements seriously because I felt like it was being a little too over-the-top edgy. I will also say 5-6, the DLC case is very solid, but I initially had AA5 pretty high on my Ace Attorney rankings, but I've kind of let it slip over time because every time I revisit it, it just feels like an outlier to me, where it's just a little bit, it's like 10% too anime for my tastes. And unfortunately, it is probably my least favorite mainline entry at this point. It used to be above AA1 for me, and then I let it drop below that, and then I think I prefer Apollo Justice's more experimental style to AA5's lack of direction and kind of anime sensibility. And that feels a little bit harsh to say, but I still think, again, any Ace Attorney is good Ace Attorney for me. So AA6, which I've actually seen a lot of people really hating it. I think that it's a good return to form for the series, honestly. I thought that it is very over the top, don't get me wrong, but I felt like it was a little bit more grounded than AA5 in terms of its tone. Not necessarily in terms of its content. You know, obviously there is the whole thing with the Kingdom of Kurain, which is like the most over the top wacky shit you could imagine, but I still felt like the game was very good at taking itself seriously when it needed to, and that really helped it for me. Case by case, 6-1 is perfectly fine intro, 6-2 is solid. I think it touched on some things that needed to be touched on again. 6-3, very underrated case in my opinion. I really loved the big twist. I genuinely did not even see it coming until the very end. 6-4 is completely fucking ridiculous, but Black Quill hard carries it, don't at me. 6-5, I loved it. There are parts to critique about it for sure. There are definitely parts that don't work, but I do think that it has a lot of very good drama to it, and it has a really good sense of scale. 6-6 was a total wreck, did not live up to the standards of 5-6, aka the AA5 DLC. I had a lot of issues with that case that... I think I would put this above AA2. Which, it makes me sad that a lot of people hate this game, because I honestly felt like I felt like the cases were all pretty tight, with the exception of 6-6, which we're not going to get into that one, but I think that case is a little bit of a wreck. But other than that, Great Ace Attorney Duology. So, this was kind of a little mini spin-off duology for the series, if you don't know it. It took a long time to get released in the West. It actually, for a while, was looking like it would never be released in the West, but a few years ago, it did finally get released in one collection, and I was so happy to play them, and I love them. These are Ace Attorneys set in the distant past with Ryunosuke Naruhodo, Phoenix Wright's ancestor, leading cases, and I think that the games are quite good. Great Ace Attorney 1, I will say, this game does have a few pacing issues. I will be very upfront about that. I think that the cases go on just a little bit too long for what they are. I'm not opposed to long cases, but I do think that there are some cases in GAA1 that don't quite land. I am a little bit more forgiving of Great Ace Attorney 1 than most. I played both games back to back with like maybe a week or two between them, so I kind of combine them in my mind, and I think that playing Great Ace Attorney 2 is kind of crucial to like getting it for these two games, because a lot of the payoff is in Great Ace Attorney 2. Like, it is very much intended as one continuous story, as opposed to like most of the other games are very, very self-contained, with maybe a few plot elements kind of being held over between games, but generally they kind of tell their own stories, whereas these two, You really, really need to play them together. And I know a few people who played GAA1 didn't quite like it and were like, maybe I'll play GAA2 eventually, and then they never got around to it. And it's like, please just play it. It will really help your opinion. Suffice to say, though, I do think that a lot of the gameplay is Ace Attorney at its best, which I just realized I have not touched on at all, the gameplay. There is more gameplay than an average VN in that there are investigation segments, there are trial segments where you're presenting evidence and looking for contradictions. I think that everybody kind of knows that, so I didn't really touch on it too much, but it is a thing. I think that the GAA games are very much refined Ace Attorney, where they've kind of found their stride in terms of the gameplay loop. They utilize a lot of mechanics that are present across a bunch of different games, and they introduce their own mechanics. Dance of Deduction is a really fun mechanic. So I will give GAA1, I think below AA2 sounds right for me. I do have to kind of judge it on its own merits more than I want to, because my brain is saying that this is one individual storyline and it's excellent, and then I have to walk myself back and be like, no, GAA1 does have some issues. I think that just to again run down the cases really quickly, I think G1 in particular is really good up until it's very last stretch, where it introduces one last plot point that goes on just too long and makes the case feel a little bit tedious. G2, interesting experimental case. I don't necessarily know that it worked out for a lot of people, but I do think that it works within the context of what the game is doing. G3, top tier, no notes. G4, really bad. G5, pretty good. I would say weaker among the final cases, but still a fun case for what it is. Let's just keep that momentum going and talk about Great Ace Attorney 2, which is my next SS tier game. As I have kind of alluded to, I love the Great Ace Attorneys as a combined duology, and Great Ace Attorney 2 has all of the payoff that you want from your Ace Attorney story, and my cat is saying hi, so sorry. Anyway, Great Ace Attorney 2 has all of the payoff that you would want from your Ace Attorney story, and any issues that you might have with Great Ace Attorney 1, I promise you that Great Ace Attorney 2 will fix them, unless you just don't like Ace Attorney at all. Honestly, again, running through the cases, G2-1, very, very strong first case. I feel like it has, there are some obvious things, but I feel like it still has enough twists and turns to make itself interesting. G2-2, no notes, very, very fun case, very likable cast. I find it has some of the most fun one-off characters in the duology for me. G2-3, excellent case, has some really interesting direction to it. I don't want to go into too much detail there, but no notes. G2-4 and G2-5 kind of combined together to make the final case, and that case is very strong. It pays off a lot of things that were set up for a very long time in that duology, and makes everything worth it, in my opinion. If you are someone who played Great Ace Attorney 1 and hasn't gotten to Great Ace Attorney 2, please play Great Ace Attorney 2. I promise you that any issues that you had will be resolved, and you will be like, I get it now. Or you won't, and you'll be like, you're a dumbass, Dots. The Ace Attorney Investigations duology. If you've ever wanted to play as the prosecutor in the series, this is kind of your chance. You play as Miles Edgeworth, aka Phoenix Wright's initial rival and lover. I will say, if you're playing this game looking to be the prosecutor and be the evil side and take down all of the witnesses and stuff, you're probably not going to really get much out of these two games. It is very similar to the general story loop, story presence of the main series. If you didn't know that Edgeworth was a prosecutor and you weren't told that, you would probably not get it from just playing this game. Obviously it's mentioned in game, but if it wasn't mentioned in game, you would think that he was a defense attorney, because there is a lot of defending people. Still, I think that Investigations tries some interesting things. I don't think that Investigations 1 worked. It tried to be a self-contained story where every case kind of contributes to the main plot in some way, and there's no filler at all. And that was an interesting idea, and I really like that as kind of a way to differentiate itself from the main series, where, there are filler cases across the board. There, even I don't think that there's any game that has absolutely no filler. Maybe some of them will tie into the main plot at the end, but they're still largely kind of their own thing. Unfortunately, the cases are just weak. I feel like the main plot is weak, really doesn't resolve itself in a particularly interesting way, and it just boils down to the cases for me. I-1-1, pretty basic starting case. I-1-2 is solid. I feel like one of the better cases. I-1-3, complete fucking train wreck. I think that it is the worst case in the series. I think that all of the characters are annoying and terrible, and I hate it. I-1-4, best case in that game, really interesting look at a few different things that I'm not going to expand upon for spoiler reasons, and I-1-5, good idea. It had a good setup with it being kind of two cases that you're tackling at once, but I felt like both of them were half-baked, and I felt like the conclusion to all of that was, like, infamously terrible. If you know all of the stuff about the final confrontation and how bad that is, it is really quite bad. I think that this is probably the worst Ace Attorney game. I'm still gonna give it an A tier because I still, like, even at Ace Attorney at its worst, I still enjoy the characters, I enjoy the character interactions. I think that the games still have some really fun twists, even if they are weaker for the series. Sorry, I'm a huge Ace Attorney apologist. Ace Attorney Investigations 2, on the other hand, absolutely excellent game. Very recently came to the West for the first time. I had played the fan translation when it was newer, and then I rebought the collection when it finally came to the West. Unfortunately, I bought it physically on Switch, and the Switch version has, like, some lag on it, of all things. You wouldn't think that an Ace Attorney game would have issues with, like, frame rate, but go fucking figure, I guess. Still, Ace Attorney Investigations 2 is Ace Attorney at its best. I think that it takes everything that Investigations 1 tried to do and refines it very, very well. Just super, super fun, super engaging, excellent story arcs, excellent characters. Cases, I-2-1, fine enough as a starting case. It's not like, it doesn't like blow me away, but it still feels very involved for what it is. I-2-2, very fun case. It has some interesting angles to it that you wouldn't quite expect it to take, and it really does a good job of, like, kind of leading you around for as long as it wants you to be in the dark. I-2-3, excellent case, does a really good job with its emotional climax and its stakes. I-2-4, I actually initially didn't like this case very much. I felt like it was a little bit too short for what it was, but on the replay, I still feel like it has a really good sense of scale and a good sense of stakes, and, like, I really feel like it did some cool things. And then I-2-5 is just top tier Ace Attorney in my opinion. Very strong candidate for the best case in the entire series for me. So that is the Ace Attorney series. Apologies to anyone who does not like Ace Attorney, and I've just been kind of rambling about these games. There are a lot of them. Biggest franchise on this list by far. I always knew it was going to be a lot to cover, and obviously I'm a huge AA fan. Even the ones that they critiqued a lot still ranked pretty highly, so sorry if you don't like the series. But let's kind of ramp off of Ace Attorney with the cousin to the series, Ghost Trick, written by Shu Takumi. Ghost Trick is about a ghost named Sissel who is trying to kind of piece together his identity and also save the most unfortunate red-headed girl ever. The game is much more of a puzzle game than anything else. I feel like it, full disclosure on this one, it's been a while since I played it. I played the original release a long time ago, and I have not touched it since, so I don't remember it very clearly. But what I do remember is that the plot is a little bit backloaded in that there's a lot of time where you're just kind of playing with puzzles, and I think that the puzzles are very fun in terms of, like, interacting with the environment, making things happen to achieve what you need to achieve, you know, save people, whatever. I feel like it's more of a puzzle game than a VN at times, basically. And that may be incorrect. I may just be misremembering it, but I remember getting, like, a lot of plot at the very, very end of the game instead of it being, like, more paced out. And that's not necessarily a critique, but I do think, like, I think that even including it as a VN on this list might be a little bit egregious in its own way, but I wasn't going to leave it out. But it has a lot of the charm of the Ace Attorney series for me, with a lot of characters that are really, like, quirky in their own right, and in a way that could probably be seen as a little bit too much, but I think that it works. I think that Ace Attorney style writing is just very good at making characters very charming and lovable, and that is something that carries over to Ghost Trick for me. And once you do get plots, I found that the plot that you get at the very end of the game is quite strong. And I remember the general plot beats of it, and I remember really enjoying the plot beats of it. So Apologies if I didn't have as much to say here, but I do think that it is kind of a little bit more of a puzzle game. Very good game, again, kind of a cousin to Ace Attorney, so if you're a fan of Ace Attorney, it's like a super easy recommend, and if you're not, still a fun puzzle game. I think it's still worth experiencing. It's been kind of ported to modern consoles and is cheap, so do yourself a favor. And yes, there are a lot of S tiers. There will be a lot of S tiers. I apologize if you don't like me talking about things I enjoy, because this is not going to be the video for you. Emio, the Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club. This is the only FTC game that I've played. I've had the remakes of the first two games on my radar for a while. I was going to get them when they were re-released onto Switch, but I kind of heard that they were a little bit obtuse in their gameplay, and that ended up, I knew some people who played the game and really didn't like it because it was, they were so obtuse. So I have only played Emio of the three, and I can kind of see it in that, but let me get to the, let me get to the synopsis first, I suppose. You are investigating the crime of a kid who was killed in a manner that reflects a local urban legend of a smiling man with a paper bag on his head who kills crying women when he sees them. So as I kind of mentioned before even diving into the game, the series is known for being a little bit obtuse, and that is something I will critique about it out of the gate. There are times when progressing a conversation is kind of physically painful. Because you have options like talk, examine, think, question. I think ask might be its own thing. There are a lot of different things that are saying similar things. And oftentimes to progress a conversation, you need to cycle through all of those options repeatedly. And there are times when it's just can you just let me make progress, please? This is miserable. With that out of the way though, I loved Emio. I actually adored it. It's a maybe 15 to 20 hour VN, so a little bit on the shorter side, but I found that it set up a really good sense of intrigue, even during segments that were a little bit slower. Actually, this follows up kind of nicely from Ghost Trick, because it follows a similar structure to its story, I find, where a lot of the bigger parts of the plot are loaded toward the back, and if you're not willing to play through the game to get those answers, that might not be the game for you, because I can't deny that there are parts of the game that are kind of not very fun to play out. But if you are willing to put in the work, I find that the payoff is very, very strong. I remember actually whenever I was playing it, I got the game on release, and my friend was interested in the game, and he kept asking me, what do you think of it? What do you think of it? Are you enjoying it? And I'm like, nah, I don't know. I'll let you know. I want to see where this goes. I want to see how it pays off. And I can't really tell you what I think about it until I see the payoff. And then I got to the payoff, and I was like, okay, yeah, this game fucking rules. I love it. Genuinely, if you're willing to put in the work for the full plot, I think that you're going to get rewarded with something that is a lot darker than you expect. And I find that the payoff is so goddamn strong. The last maybe hour or two of the game's total runtime for me was just 10 out of 10 territory. I was so hooked. I was so happy to get all of the answers, and I think that everything lived up to the expectations that I had set up for it. So I really, really loved it. I am going to put it... Actually, as I'm I've been trying to generally order this, but I think I'm going to move Hotel Dusk down just a little bit. I still love it, but I'm going to put it just a little bit lower here. That feels about right. I'm going to move just Elysium down just a little bit too. There, that feels about right. Huge fan of Emio. Okay, it is time for the house in Fata Morgana. If you know me at all, I think you know where this is going to rank, but let's pretend like we don't know this. So, the House of Fata Morgana is about a house that is rumored to have a witch in it. You awaken as an unknown soul, guided by a mysterious maid, and you experience a series of tales that take place in the past. And that is about the most that I can say, because there's a lot to the premise that itself that is naturally supposed to be a mystery, so I don't want to say more than that. How can I draw this out? I can't. This is my favorite game of all time. I love Fata Morgana so fucking much. I remember whenever I got it, I had randomly seen a post on a forum that just mentioned, like, if you like story games, you should play this game. And I was like, I like story games. I like visual novels. Let me give this a spin. Got it, tried it. I remember I was pretty much immediately hooked, and I actually think that the first door is like one of the weaker ones, but it like already got me out of the gate because I was like really digging the music. I really loved the aesthetic. I loved the art. I found that the payoff to the first door was really good, and I was like, oh, I'm so excited to see what happens next. And then I loved door 2, and then I loved door 3, and I'm not going to talk about how many doors there are total, but I loved pretty much all of them. And as I got deeper to the main plot, I found myself crying like all the time. Like, I could not, like, seriously, if there's one singular game that has made me cry the most of anything, it is Fata Morgana, because that game had its hooks right in my heart, and I was emotionally invested. I was along for the ride every single step of the way. I feel like if you want to quantify payoff as an aspect of the game, I think that the game pays off wonderfully. I think that there wasn't a single plot point that I felt was underexplored. Everything just felt like it was fleshed out as much as it needed to be without going too far. I felt like everything was just perfect. I feel like using the word perfect is like really loaded in its own right, but I am kind of known for recommending this game to everybody I know. It genuinely means a lot to me as an experience. I don't think that there has ever been another video game or even another like form of media that has like worked its way into my heart the way Fata did, and I was just enchanted is the best word that I can use for it. Like, I just was so engaged with it. I had so many running theories. I was so emotionally invested in every single character except for maybe like one. If you know, you know. maybe two. There's one who doesn't really get much content, but that's kind of not. That's kind of a side character anyway, so whatever. I'm trying not to just gush about the game. I'm trying to like provide some amount of information that's not just I love everything about it, go buy it right now, but that is how I feel about the game. Okay, let me I guess be fair. If you are not into the emotional aspect of a game and like a VN, and like you don't love like if you don't like games that make you cry, maybe Fata isn't for you. Personally, I like when games make me cry. I like whenever I'm that emotionally invested. So it was just a very beautiful experience for me, and one that I have kind of become infamous for being kind of annoying about in recent years because I never shut the fuck up about this game. But I seriously, I love it. I love Fata Morgana to death, and I genuinely think if you like visual novels at all, you should try it. I truly think that anybody who enjoys VNs on any level will get something out of Fata. Let's follow that up with Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence. I can't really go into too many details on the premise of this one. It is a prequel to Fata Morgana that expands upon some details that are really relevant to the main story. If you are interested in these two, play the base game of Fata Morgana first before touching Requiem, please. Requiem will spoil a lot of things about Fata, and that is why I can't really say too many things about its premise. It is a much shorter experience. It's more of a companion piece to Fata, but I think that it does what it needs to do well. I think that it definitely elevates a lot of characters that I enjoyed in the base game, but just got fleshed out that much more in Requiem, and it answers a few lingering questions from Fata, which I find really fun. There were a handful of questions that were intentionally set up to be resolved in Requiem, and I really enjoy that it kind of bounces off of that. I will say, I've actually seen people who think that Requiem is the stronger of the two. I find that Fata is, like, the base game of Fata is just better. I feel like it's just a more fleshed out experience, and Requiem is kind of just the companion piece that adds a little bit more to it, but I still find it to be an excellent experience in its own right. Again, a much shorter game. I would say that Fata Morgana is probably in the 30 to 40 hour range, whereas Requiem for Innocence is more around 8 to 10. Worth noting, Requiem does actually have some little side stories that add a little, like, either expand upon some details that really didn't need to be expanded upon, but it's kind of interesting to see a little bit more on them, or they add some, like, kind of additional epilogues to some storylines that I found to be really fun. If you enjoy Fata Morgana at all, I do think that Requiem is worth a play. It is bundled in with the Switch version of the game and is pretty cheap on Steam, so if you're a fan of Fata, definitely, like, it's an easy recommend as a companion piece. Paranormasight, The 7 Mysteries of Honjo, a recent visual novel about a bunch of people who find these curse stones which allow you to curse someone to death. Becomes kind of a battle royale situation as the people fight each other for possession of the curse stones, because there is a rumored rite of resurrection at the end where you can bring someone back to life. This visual novel went a little bit under the radar, just a little bit. I feel like it has found some amount of appreciation, but by and large, I feel like nobody really talked about it outside of like VN circles. And that is a shame, because I feel like it is a top-notch experience. A very, very breezy little visual novel, maybe 10 to 15 hours total, but I think it makes very good use of that time. I felt like everything was very fleshed out in a short span. Very, very good cast. I really liked pretty much every single character. I really don't think that there's a singular weak character among the entire cast, and that is kind of a really tough feat to pull off. If I had one singular critique of Paranormasight, and this feels kind of harsh to even critique, because this is just my personal preference, but I do at least want to bring it up. The first hour or so of the game, it has like this excellent horror atmosphere to it. It has so much tension. I was just glued to the screen. I was like, this might be one of my favorite games of all time. This is so fucking good. I do find that horror element kind of wanes after that point, and the game kind of becomes more of just a standard like mystery, and it's more about like, you know, the characters, the relationships, trying to get these stones, trying to solve some of the mysteries, you know, getting some background lore about all of this stuff. And that's fine, because it still does a very, like, it's an excellent game. I feel like every part of it is excellent. It's just, if you had a game that maintained what Paranormasight did in the first hour for the full game, I think that would be a contender for one of my favorite games, like, ever made. Like, it's just so sublime, and I do wish that tone had kind of managed to stick around for the rest of it, but I don't want to bash the rest of the game at all. Like, it's such a damn good game, because like I said, just a very, like, the game is set up so that, like, it's kind of in teams, where you have like a playable character, and that playable character has a sidekick, and that is like the general structure for each perspective in the story. And I found that all of those major characters are very, very, very well written. They all have very strong motivations. They're all very interesting. They all have different angles to them. And again, this is all in an experience that is quite short by VN standards. And even though it was on the shorter side, I didn't feel like it was like, I didn't feel shortchanged by the story at all. I felt like it told the story that it wanted to tell very effectively, and I felt like it knew where it wanted to end and ended it. It didn't need to extend itself out like to like 40 hours or 50 hours or whatever. And that is very impressive. So I'm actually ranking Paranormasight very, very highly. It doesn't crack my SS tier, but it is very close. Again, it is a short VN. It is pretty cheap by VN standards. I think you can get it for like $15 or something. So again, very, 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 very easy recommend to VN fans, especially if you like kind of the horror element. But I do, want to caution you that isn't the whole game. It's more of like a standard mystery as it goes. Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human. I'm not going to spend too much time on these two games. Heavy Rain, you are looking for the origami killer, and Detroit, you are you're robots, and you're trying to do robot things, whatever, what the fuck ever. These games are not visual novels, let's just be clear. I would call them more like interactive movies than anything. David Cage sure is a writer, let's just say that. These games are dumb fun, like, to the max. If you like silly kind of choose your own adventure and games, like, and just seeing where your choices will take you and like what kind of wacky outcomes you can get, you'll have some fun with these two games. If you're looking for a serious storyline, please look anywhere else, because these games are not good at delivering that. It's actually very apt that I'm ranking them next to Zero Time Dilemma, because I feel like they are very similar tonally, and that there's a lot of like really goofy, unintentional humor where like just very silly things are happening, and the game is taking itself very seriously, and it's not good. But honestly, I will say this much: the games are kind of guilty pleasure games for me. First of all, both of them have like kind of big plot holes that are pretty infamous. It feels kind of silly to even talk about them because I feel like everybody knows the plots of these games by now. But even though they suck, like that's harsh. I don't want to say they suck. They don't suck. They're just not good. Even though they're not very good, when I beat Detroit, I immediately went back and started another playthrough and just made totally different choices and just wanted to see like where things went and how this changed the story. And I think that is a very fun way to experience something. Like, I think it's just kind of fun to sit back, play like a 10-hour game and make silly choices and see where they go. And like, if you're not taking it seriously, that is really fun, honestly. So that's about the most I can say about them, because I don't even, like, I'm not even getting into the plot. There's just no point. They're both plots are so goddamn stupid that there's just no fucking point. So sorry if you're a huge David Cage fan. I think that he is not a good writer, but he's an entertaining writer, and that's something. The Wolf Among Us. You play as Bigsby Wolf, who is investigating a crime murder, I think, in this like fairy tale village. It's been a while since I played this game, admittedly. This is very much a Telltale game, which isn't a subgenre of VNs, if you even want to call them VNs. I don't know that people necessarily do that, but it's kind of its own little thing that I don't have too much experience with. I think that this is my only like true Telltale experience, and it was okay. What I will say, I really liked the general world of The Wolf Among Us. I don't necessarily know that it's fair to like praise the game for that, considering I believe it's based on the comic series. I'm not familiar with the comics at all, but I do believe that it comes from comics. So it does feel kind of unfair to be like, yeah, the world is so cool and interesting, it has all these fun characters. And then, well, it's not really the game that did that. It's like the comics. But unfortunately, I found that the mystery itself kind of sucks. If I'm being honest, like, I felt like I had a bunch of theories, and then the game just like didn't even really like let me explore those theories. The game is just like, here's the answer, and it was like, I found the answer kind of boring, if I'm being honest. And I don't want to go like too far into detail because, again, spoilers. But when I look at the main plot of The Wolf Among Us as a whole, I kind of find it more boring than anything. That's not something that I want to say about a visual novel, because like the plot is the draw. But again, I do have to praise it for its world and characters. So there's that. Sorry if I've rushed past the David Cage games and The Wolf Among Us. I wasn't even really totally sure about including them, but Heavy Rain and The Wolf Among Us were both on the list already, and so I was like, you know, well, I've played these games, I'll chuck them on here, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, because I really don't consider the David Cage games VNs at all, and I actually added Detroit myself, so sorry. Next up, we have a pair of slightly newer visual novels, The Somnium Files and its sequel Nirvana Initiative. These games focus around an organization known as Abyss, which features a number of characters known as Sinkers. These characters can sink into Somniums, aka dreams of other characters, and they use this ability to solve murder cases. Both games feature serial killings, and a central component of it is diving into dreams, you know, to collect evidence, figure things out, gather information that sometimes the dreamer isn't even aware of, or sometimes the dreamer is consciously hiding from people, etc. I do find that the whole like dream concept is both one of the big strengths of the series and also kind of a weakness, but I'll get into that in a second. The first game in the series stars Kaname Date, who is the main character of the series overall at this point. I think it's kind of established. And the second game features a character from the first game, Mizuki, as well as a newcomer, Ryuki. And both games have you solving two different serial killings that they're pretty standalone games, if I'm being honest. Like, there are connections between games, there are characters that carry over between games, obviously, but the core plots of each are very much their own thing, and they kind of make it so you can play either game in either order. But I would still recommend playing Somnium Files 1 first. So one of the big unique factors is the gameplay, which has you, as I kind of alluded to earlier, you dive into dreams to solve the cases, and that's where you kind of have these little puzzle rooms, which they're interesting. The concept is interesting. The concept of like going into dreams to solve crimes is cool. And I wish that it was executed a little bit better than it was, if I'm being totally honest, because I feel like oftentimes the Somnium segments tend to be kind of just trial and error and very little else. They very intentionally follow dream logic, which is intended to be very illogical, very nonsensical. You know, sometimes there is some like connecting logic to it, especially in the Nirvana Initiative. They did a much better job of making it like actually make any amount of sense in Nirvana Initiative, and like you can actually kind of like see where they're coming from instead of it just feeling totally random. But oftentimes the gameplay segments are just like choose an option, see if it's right or wrong, and if it's wrong, then you lose time, and then if you get a game over, then you know which option is right in the future, and like that's it. Like there's so little logic to them that I feel like where these Somnium things could be like really, really cool, they're often not the best. But I do think that, again, I think the Nirvana Initiative does a really good job of, like, improving them. And while they are still kind of trial and error, they at least are more unique. There's some, like, really fun ones in there. The final Somnium of Nirvana Initiative is very, very good, in my opinion. I think that it is, like, the best in either game by a huge margin. And there's a really, like, fun and silly one in Nirvana that I'm, again, not going to, like, go into specifics about, but it's very goofy, very mechanically interesting, and just a really fun time. So one really, really big factor in these two games is the tone, which is extremely anime. And if I'm being honest, I usually really don't like super anime tones. I kind of find it to be like just not for me. Like I'm not gonna like rationalize it too much. It's just not a tone that works for me a lot of the time, and that's fine. But I feel like Somnium really it takes it dials it to 11, and somehow it makes it work for me, where like I feel like it shouldn't. I feel like I should dislike these games totally, but I don't know, there's something really charming about them. They're so over the top and zany, and just really in a way that makes them very charming to me, honestly. Like, again, it makes no sense, because like I think of like Dual Destinies, and that was a very anime game, and there's another game coming up on the list that is very anime, and like I didn't like that tone in those games. Like I very specifically critique them for feeling too anime and just not really working for me. And Somnium, just I don't know how it does it, but it does it. It makes it work. Like Kaname Date is a character who nine times out of 10 I would hate him. He's like a pervert, flirty archetype, and that is just not a type of character that I enjoy at all. Those tend to be like some of my least favorite characters in pretty much any kind of storytelling, but somehow he's just that charming and like that fun. And like if I were to like gauge him on a scale of 1 to 10, if the anime is an 11 out of 10, Date is like a 14 out of 10 on the like perv scale, and like somehow it's just so zany that like it just ends up being really endearing. And I really do think that that is kind of like the word of the segment, where it's like it's such an endearing, it's such a charming series that like I really do love it. I will say, I guess on the critique side, that there are a lot of things that you could poke holes in both of them in terms of their main plots. There are a few things that feel a little contrived. There are times when I feel like the game withholds certain things from you for no reason other than to surprise you later, and I don't really like that. It feels a little bit too convenient as far as storytelling goes. I'm not going to go into any specifics beyond that, because I think that gets a little too spoilery. Like I feel like I'm right on the edge of where I want to be as far as spoilers, and I don't want to push past that. But I do think that I would kind of have issues with both games in terms of their overall plot line, and I would kind of... It's hard for me to praise them too much on that front, basically, because I feel like both of them just have a lot of issues on that specific aspect. With that said, very fun cast of characters, very vivid characters that are super engaging, super entertaining. I think both games have their weaker characters. Both games have characters that I like actively hate, but by and large, I would say that most of them are really fun, really funny, really endearing, really charming. I feel like I've used those words like 9 times already in this entry, but whatever. It's very apt. So I am going to give both games the lower part of S for me, I think. It feels maybe a little overly generous that I'm giving both of them S. I do have a lot of issues with them, particularly in the main plot department, but I just think that they do still tell really good stories, even if, yeah, you can kind of poke some holes in them. And I enjoy the cast, I enjoy the writing, I enjoy all the kooky shenanigans that they get into. I personally give the nod to Nirvana initiative of the two. I felt like I found its emotional stakes to be better. I found it's like, it had more weight to it, and I was more personally satisfied with the way it resolved than I was about the first game. I'm pretty sure that that's a really uncommon opinion. I think most people prefer the first game by quite a bit, but, you know, I was upfront in saying that my opinions are not very good, so don't worry about that. I'm aware. I guess I should also note, at the time of recording this, there is a third game out in the series, No Sleep for Kaname Date. I haven't gotten it yet. I've been interested in getting it, but I've heard kind of mixed things about it, if I'm being honest. And what I heard was that it was less focused on like telling a serious story, and it was more of like a comedy game. And like when I heard that, I was like, I don't know. And then I heard it was like 10 hours long, and like they were still charging like full price for it, and I was like, you know what, I will get it on sale sometime, but I'm not gonna like rush out and get it. So I am interested in playing it, but I am kind of a little bit wary of it, unfortunately. But I love the series thus far. I think it's a lot of fun. Really easy recommend if you haven't gotten around to it yet. I think that if you like games like Danganronpa or Ace Attorney, it fits well enough with those. I'm actually a little bit sad that it hasn't gotten the mainstream attention that those games have, because I feel like it's similar enough to them where I feel like it should get the attention that they get. And it's not like it's an obscure series, but it is a series that I don't see people talk about much, so I like it a lot. Good series. Okay, the Layton series. Visual novels about a really, really charming professor named Professor Layton and his sidekick Luke, and sometimes another sidekick named Emmy. Kind of like the Ace Attorney series. I don't want to like go into the individual plots here. I could kind of give a summary on these, but I won't. This series is very, very charming. Whether you vibe with the writing for these games or not is kind of up to you, because the series is known for having really big and really stupid twists. I will be blunt on that. I would say that the hallmark of the games is like twists that make you go, wow, that was a huge twist. That is also the dumbest thing I have ever seen. This is great. That is like the exact reaction I get from like any Layton game I play. Major component of the series is its puzzles. The world of Layton is one where literally everything is solved by solving puzzles, and expect like hundreds of puzzles in any given game. Obviously, with that many puzzles, things vary a lot. I think that judging the overall puzzle quality is really hard for any individual game. Sans one, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So for me, when I judge the Layton games, it kind of comes down to how strong I found the plot, how much I liked the big twists, how much even the characters kind of, like the core cast generally remains pretty much the same, and that's like the draw of all of the games. So I can't even really judge them off of that. I will say the Curious Village is probably in a lower A tier for me. I remember when I played it, I was kind of put off by the series. I got to the twist and like got the full plot. It was like, this is incredibly stupid, but it is charming, and I do have to give it credit for being like a fun adventure for what it is. I've actually never been the biggest fan of Diabolical Box. I felt like the adventure component was kind of lacking because a lot of the game takes place on a train, And while there are like stops, and while the game kind of shakes it up a little bit, I did find it kind of confining compared to being able to explore the village from the first game. I also called a twist in it very, very early on in the game, and that kind of hurt my enjoyment because I kind of got the general plot too early. Unwound Future is one where I will kind of pump the brakes a little bit and talk about this in a little bit more detail. I feel like Unwound Future is where the series went from being more about the puzzles and having like maybe one big twist and just being kind of a silly experience to having more of a central narrative and having more of like more emotional stakes and a bigger payoff. And I think that it worked very, very, very well. I am not going to go into detail there, but I do think that the ending of Unwound Future is one of my favorite endings to anything ever. And that is a really, really, that is a lot of praise to heap on something, but I honestly, to this day, I remember the ending and my reaction to it, and it was a very, very, very good ending. So I feel like the series kind of took a step forward with Unwound Future, and I really do appreciate that it did that, because I felt like the first two games were kind of narratively simple in the grand scheme of things, albeit they do have their own kind of, again, they have their grandiose twists, and they certainly have their own narratives, but I felt like Unwound Future took itself more seriously, and I really appreciate that. Spectre's Call, I would put it around Curious Village tier, maybe a little bit higher for kind of being a little bit more technically refined, but a little bit lower stakes. Introduces a very good character in Emio, who is one of my favorites in that series. I found her to be a really fun addition to the cast. Don't have too much to say about its main plot. I found it to be serviceable, better than Curious Village for me, but not anything like remarkable. Miracle Mask, the series' first foray into the 3DS, and I think it did it utilized the 3DS very well. I felt like it really took a big step forward technically, and I know that isn't something to really praise too highly on a VN, but it felt like a more epic adventure than most of the Layton games, and I did feel like it had a lot of, again, it kind of carried over some of the narrative weight from Unwound Future for me, where it took itself a little bit more seriously than most of the other games, and that is the kind of something with Spectre's Call as well. I did feel like after Unwound Future, all of the games kind of took themselves a little bit more seriously. Azrael Legacy, final game in the mainline series, I am going to give this a lower S tier. I've seen some kind of mixed opinions on this one because it does have a few elements to its main story that are a little bit controversial. Not in a serious content type way, but just in a the story resolves itself in some kind of strange ways. But what Azrael Legacy did is give itself a really big sense of scale, where you have this big globe-trotting adventure, and it feels like you're traveling all over. And it was billed as it was very much written as the finale to the Layton series. And even though the series kind of got rebooted since then, it is getting a new entry in the main series next year at the point that I'm recording this. It very much feels like a grand finale where you're all around the globe and all of these different locations, and there's just a big sense of gravity to it where I could really feel the finality to everything going on in that game. So even though the narrative might have some issues, I still feel like it wrapped up a lot of things very, very well, and I really like the sense of scale to the game. Well, so I have covered 6 Layton games in a pretty short span. That leaves us with Layton's Mystery Journey. I think with any other game on this list, I have tried to be pretty diplomatic. Even if there are flaws, I try to be at least somewhat kind about them. I try to make it as a matter of opinion. With Steins Gate, there were things that I really didn't care for at all, but again, that was just my opinion. Those segments of the game are things that I don't personally care for, but I know that others would. Layton's Mystery Journey is where I will kind of break that rule. This game is the biggest heaping pile of fucking dog shit you will ever play. It's not even entertaining bad, where with the Zero Time Dilemma, at least it's being kind of unintentionally funny, and like all of the silly animations that don't really work are fun to laugh at. Like, that's enjoyable. Layton's Mystery Journey is just slop. That is the only way I can describe this fucking game. It is so bad. There is nothing to this game. If I played a game that was like 30 whatever maybe hours of just sitting in a room and watching paint dry, that is Layton's Mystery Journey. So, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. So this is kind of a reboot of the Layton series. You know, the series had ended at this point. They tried to reboot it a little bit with this game. That was a continuation that took place several years later with Professor Layton's daughter. And where Layton is a, running mystery throughout the game. Unfortunately, any mystery that the game sets up, let me just say, this is a little bit spoilery. I apologize if I spoil this for you. If you really, really want to play this game, maybe skip ahead 20 seconds, maybe not. I don't know. It's not a big spoiler, but pretty much any mystery that the game sets up for itself, it doesn't bother to answer. It doesn't go, none of the plot points go anywhere. The game literally ends by reminding you of the things that it never answered. It's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we answered this mystery? Well, fuck you, dumbass. We're not gonna do that. We're just gonna end the fucking game. Buy the sequel. And then it never got a sequel because nobody fucking played this game because nobody enjoyed it because it sucks ass. So the other games in the series have good puzzles. They're obviously up and down. There are some bad puzzles in there. I can't say that every puzzle is necessarily a hit. Layton's Mystery Journey, unfortunately, by this time, it had been several years since the previous entry, and the puzzle maker for the series had unfortunately passed away in the interim, and there was a new puzzle designer. I feel bad for critiquing the game for this, but the puzzles just blow. They just fucking blow. They're not fun. There are occasionally in the main series, there are puzzles that are kind of trick questions where there's a little catch in the wording that, trips you up, and it's meant to make you go on the wrong track. And, maybe 2 or 3 puzzles per game will be that, where it's not really the way you initially think it is, and you just have to kind of, change your line of thinking and pay attention to the wording of the question. That is about 70% of the puzzle, of at least the word puzzles in Mystery Journey are just that. And that doesn't work because when you start overusing that, the player, aka me in this case, starts looking for that in any given puzzle, where anytime there's a new puzzle, I'm like, okay, where's the fucking trick? Let's just get this fucking over with. And lo and fucking behold, yeah, every fucking time it's the motherfucking trick question. It's like, oh, okay, I solved the fucking trick question, so let's just move the fuck on and get to the rest of this dumbass slop fucking game. So you might be thinking, well, it's still a VN adjacent, whatever. Surely it has a story. Surely there's something going on there. No, because fuck you, player. This game was designed for mobile first. And because of that, it was released in an episodic format where it's I believe that they released, an episode at a time over the course of several months or something. I don't know for sure, but I know that it was released episodically for mobile first. So when it was ported to consoles, it retained that format, except it turns out that all of these little miniature storylines are just fucking nothing. They're all bland, boring, there's no stakes, there's barely a conflict to speak of. There aren't really any major twists worth pointing out. The game kind of tries to half-assedly do the mainline Layton thing where it kind of throws out these grandiose twists, but I just find myself not fucking caring about any of them because, again, the game is just mobile fucking slop. If you made a Layton gacha game, this is probably what you would get, except that would be more interesting because it would have a gambling component, and at least that would be kind of fun sometimes. This is just nothing. No fun puzzles. No good characters. The mysteries, might as well not even have them if the game's not even gonna fucking bother to answer them. I do think, let me be fair, I think that they made a continuation, and I think there was an anime or something where they actually did answer some questions, but in game form, they never fucking answer anything. It's just pointless. The game is pointless. There is nothing to this game. I apologize if you're a big fan of Layton's Mystery Journey. I'm imagining little Timmy, who's his favorite game is Layton's Mystery Journey, and be oh boy, I can't wait to see this ranked, and then I'm just sitting here shitting all over it. But the game really made me very mad. I remember gradually, I was so excited because I like the rest of the series. Even again, I wasn't the biggest fan of whatever the fucking box one is. My brain isn't working anymore. I'm on mystery journey mode. Obviously, I wasn't the biggest fan of that, but it was still, I still enjoyed the puzzles. I still found it a very charming game. This game was just nothing. Nothing. I will say I kind of liked the inspector lady. She like had like a personality, even if it was kind of like supposed to be like unpleasant and antagonistic. I will say I always expected like an arc from her where she would like, become friends with Catriel, but it really didn't go anywhere. And even though the game kind of started to do that, it kind of like just didn't. So yeah, I got nothing. I fucking hate this game. Like I really, really hate this game. Again, sorry, I actually like lost my train of thought and I just realized that I never like followed up on what I had set up to say. What I was saying is, even with other Layton games that I didn't really enjoy, I still found them charming and endearing, and I enjoyed the puzzles, and I was so excited to play another Layton game, and I could just feel all of that excitement just dwindling with every single step I took in that game as I realized that these little mini plots that it has set up don't really go anywhere, that all of these puzzles are just like, it took me like maybe like 2 or 3 hours to catch on to how the puzzles work and how it overutilizes the trick question aspect. And just my excitement just kept dying, and I kept like trying to hang in there like, okay, maybe at the end it's gonna like all tie together and it's gonna be this really cool plot where it's like all of these things mattered in the end, and then it's like, no, there is no plot. There's no plot to this. There's nothing. It just, do yourself a favor. If you are playing the Layton series for the first time, I actually know some people who play Layton games occasionally or who are interested in this series. Just skip Mystery Journey. It is not a good game. I'm sorry. Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. Maybe the most out of nowhere crossover you could ever think of. Bottom of A feels about right for that. I generally feel like Layton versus Ace Attorney is on the lower end of both series for me, where it kind of, like, I think that it did a very good job of taking the DNA of both series and meshing them together into one game. I don't necessarily know that those always worked together. I think that there are times when you could, they felt like two very separate experiences that you were bouncing back and forth between, and even when it all kind of tries to come together at the end, it's still kind of shaky. It has the signature very big twist from the Layton series, and I don't think that worked at all. Unfortunately, like, when I think of the main plot of the game, I kind of just side-eye it a little bit, like, are you sure you really wanted to go in that direction? Because I don't know that was the best way to do this plot, but, you do you. With that said, the game has, like, an obscene amount of charm. I think it takes two very charming series and pushes them together and manages to make their styles, their style, like, stylistically it blends very well, even if the gameplay doesn't necessarily always blend. It did try to kind of blend the gameplay at one point, and it was very, like, there's a point where they try to blend the puzzles and the, like, contradiction finding of the two series into one thing, and it was like, oh, okay, I guess you tried that. Yeah, that's something. If you like these two series, it's a no-brainer to play this game. Like, it's, it's silly fun. It's just, don't go expecting a big plot. Don't necessarily go expecting the game to, like, work as well as it should have in places. But if you want a pretty okay experience for both series, then yeah, have fun with it. Plus, getting to see Layton and Phoenix and Luke and Maya all get to hang out, it's a treat for fans of the series. Umineko, When They Cry. Oh boy. Umineko tells the story of the island of Rokkenjima, where a family, which is probably the most dysfunctional fucking family on the planet, has its annual family conference, and they quickly find that things are spiraling out of control as murders are afoot, and you need to solve the case, kind of. So, let me contextualize this one a little bit, okay? I had the idea for this video back in June. I wanted to record this video. I was in the middle of some VNs, I had just played some VNs, I was really excited to do a video like this. But I had Umineko in my Steam library already, and I was like, this is a very prolific VN. I think that if you were to poll every single moderately hardcore VN fan of their favorite game, Umineko would probably come out on top. So I was like, let me play this game for the purposes of this video. Let me get, I think that it would be too big of an omission to not have it, especially considering I already own the game. So from late July to early September, all of my gaming time was dedicated to Umineko When They Cry. Let me cut to the chase here. I hated it, and I can already feel a wave of dislikes and angry comments coming if an Umineko fan were to find this. If you were just somebody who is somebody who knows me, like a friend, somebody that I share a Discord server with or something, you probably already know this. There were a lot of Umineko related crash outs that took place over this span of time where I was like, wow, I am really not enjoying this game. So the next logical question is why? Why did I not enjoy Umineko? So let me try to be as political, as diplomatic as I can possibly be with this one and explain why Umineko did not land for me. I think there are two distinct issues that I had with it that kind of intertwine. Let me start with the more simplistic of them. That is the tone. I found a lot of the tone to be kind of on the anime side of things. I have, if you've watched this video up to this point, you might have noticed that if something is very anime in tone, I kind of critique it a little bit for that. Notably with Dual Destinies, that was a major critique that I have of that game. I did mention that it worked for me in Somnium because I felt like Somnium kind of, played it in a slightly different way and wore it on its sleeve and was kind of made it into something a little bit more charming. But I have mentioned a few times that is not a tone that works for me. That was very much a thing with Umineko. I remember being greeted by the main character, Battler, and one of the things that you pick up on very quickly with Battler is that he is the flirty pervert type, where he flirts with an old lady, he flirts with his cousin, he flirts with his 9-year-old cousin and tells her that he will be interested when she grows up a little bit, and I just remember my eyes glazing over, what the fuck is this? Again, Kaname Date in Somnium Files made the pervert archetype kind of work for me. I felt like they played it just silly enough to make it work. Battler did not work for me, and that tone just really took me out of the experience. The more involved critique that I have of Umineko, the prose is so bad that I think that almost single-handedly ruined the entire game for me. Umineko boasts being some 140 hours to play. I have seen it used as a selling point for the game that it is it used to, I think, formerly be the longest visual novel ever written, and I think 100 Line actually passed it up if you take all of the 100 Line routes in total. Here's the thing. The game is an expert at making everything take 4 times longer than it needed to take. Where it would, seriously, there were times when it would describe something, the next sentence would describe the exact same thing, worded slightly differently. The next sentence after that would describe the exact same thing for a third time, written in a slightly different way. And that just made the game drag for me. I just remember playing session after session after session, and I'm sitting here waiting for the action to start, and I'm just slowly realizing that nothing is happening, and I'm like, okay, it's a long game, it has to establish all of these character dynamics. Let me just give it a chance. I'm going to I was very determined to give it a chance. I beat this game. I did not enjoy the game. I would say 95% of the game I was not having any amount of fun, and I was like, I'm fucking beating this game. I'm fucking giving this a chance. I want to have a fully informed opinion on this game. I don't want to judge it for, just episode 1 or whatever. Almost every single scene, even the scenes that worked for me, I felt like the prose just kept wrecking it. It kept slowing things down. It kept making it so I would just get impatient and just be ready for the game to move the fuck on and talk about something else. But no, instead it would just have to keep describing the same things over and over. It would have to keep, there were times when it would describe like emotions that I already knew about. Like the game had already given me this information. I already knew these relationships, these dynamics, these emotions, how a character reacts to these things. I knew this from previous episodes, or even earlier in the episode, and the game would go into detail about it again. And I'm just like, okay, but why the fuck are we doing this? Could we like move forward? So if you describe the same things over and over and over and over and over and over again, I don't think that the length of the game becomes an asset. I think that the length of the game becomes a really, really marked, like, negative point for it. I think that the game, like, I would critique the game quite strongly for that, because so much of the game is just wasted space and wasted time, and that drug me out of the experience so hard. I am not letting the game off the hook at other arenas, though. Let me make that clear. Another thing that is more of a matter of personal preference, like I genuinely think that the prose is an objective flaw with the game. And I'm sorry, I have seen people call this game literally perfect. I've seen people say that there are no flaws in the game whatsoever. I think that the prose is objectively a flaw. A more subjective issue, I felt like the game was stuffed with a lot of really superfluous side characters who didn't really add much. And I felt like as you went along from chapter to chapter, it just kept adding all of these kooky, wacky anime side characters. And like you have like the 7 Steak sisters, and like the Bunny Girl sisters, and like the door whatever guard girls, and like the MC characters, and just more and more and more of these side characters. And I was the most interested in the characters that you met at the very beginning. I think that the core cast that you meet at the very beginning of the game is like far and away where the game's like strong point is. And unfortunately, the game just seemed to lose interest in those characters. I felt like the game was just so interested in like bringing in all these crazy, wacky side characters, and I'm just like, okay, but what about all these other characters who are really, you know, interesting and complex? Like, let's like do more with them. And the game was like, nah, they don't matter anymore. We're more interested in having these like wacky MC girls having a love contest, and having these Bunny Girl sisters talk like robots and have their like aiming systems jam. And I'm just like, great. What I will say, the game does an interesting job. Trying to think of how I can like phrase this without getting into any kind of spoiler territory, because I really don't want to spoil the game. The game is very interested in dissecting certain tropes and literary elements of stories, of fiction as a whole at times, of stuff like that. There are a lot of very meta elements. I'm not going to go into detail on what form that takes, but it is a major component to the game. I found that to be very interesting. I don't necessarily agree with some of the things that the game said. I think that the game kind of gets in its own way with some of the points that it's making by the end of it. I really feel like it kind of overcooks itself a little bit in that area, but I do at least admire the scope that it is trying to take. I will also say, I had kind of alluded to it earlier, but I do think that some of the characters are genuinely very, very strong. Particularly like among the characters that you meet at first, those were generally like the most interesting to me. And I found several of them to be very, very complex characters, very morally gray, a lot of room for analysis and interpretation of them. I will list a few of my favorites just for fun. Eva, Rosa, Natsui, I think all 3 of them were very, very strong characters. I enjoyed all of them a lot. Goda was a lot of fun. I think Beatrice is kind of a fan favorite. I enjoyed her. Maybe not as much as others do, but I still think that she was a, fairly strongly written character. Kraus was fun. I felt like a lot of the family members were generally fairly well written. I will say there was a character in particular who shows up in Chapter 5. If you know the structure of the game, you probably know who I'm talking about. Who I really did not vibe with, who was really emblematic of the super anime tone and all of the things that I didn't enjoy about the game. And I'm like, I hate this character. And then after I beat the game, I looked up impressions and found out that she is by far and away a fan favorite character who everybody loves. And I'm like, well, okay, fuck me, I guess this game is just not for me. Tonally, this is not clicking with me. And clearly there are elements that other people enjoyed that I did not, and that is like that. I guess that's fine, because unfortunately it did not land for me. One other thing I will say about Umineko, probably not one. I will probably think of something else to say as soon as I finish this. But I felt like early on there was kind of this horror tone to it, where there was a lot more tension and a lot more kind of a darker atmosphere. I felt like that dwindled very, very quickly. As I went, I felt like of the 8 episodes, it maintained that dark tone for about 2.5 of them, and then it just really started to tank off and really like fall off, and it really just didn't seem interested in maintaining that tone at all. And that was when I felt that the game was at its strongest. Oh, that yes, I did remember something else. Another like major critique I have of it. This goes along with the pros, but the game often, okay, again, I mentioned that the tone is very anime, right? The game often felt like it was trying to be a shonen anime. To those ends, the game had these extended fight scenes where it would use just every anime trope you could think of, and I just found it so goddamn ridiculous. You have things like, I felt like every scene was like, and then he teleported behind her and used his super decapitating attack that is undodgeable and nobody can possibly survive it. But that was just her after image, and she appeared behind him and used her super ultimate kill black hole death technique, and no one can possibly survive it. He will surely be dead, but that was just his after image, and he appeared behind her, and it's just back and forth, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my god, just let this fucking end already. I'm sorry. This has got to be like not very fun for Umineko fans to sit through, because I would say 90% of this game did not land for me in the least. But those goddamn fight scenes were just like torture. They were like physical fucking torture for me. Let me tell you, this is going to sound awful. This is probably going to destroy any amount of credibility that I still have left at this stage of this video, which is it has probably dwindled to a very low amount regardless. But when I played Umineko, this is a true story. This is 100% true. I promise you that I am not exaggerating this in the least. When I played Umineko, it was at a point where I had kind of grown my hair out. Not like super, super long, but my hair was, like around like shoulder length-ish, maybe a little bit shorter. There were times, and particularly during the fight scenes, which is why I bring this up now, there were times when I was so fucking bored playing Umineko and watching these fight scenes and just waiting for the plot to move forward, my head would start to droop, like unconsciously. Like, I promise I wasn't like doing this on purpose. My head would start to like droop, and I would like grab the back of my hair and physically pull my head up to keep like to make sure that I could keep reading the text. And I was like, I've got to keep going. I've got to finish this game. I want to give this a fair chance. I want to play all 140 hours and experience the whole game. And I just had to, I had to keep forcing myself to keep going. And unfortunately, that says a lot about how much I enjoy the experience. Let me try to salvage this a little bit and mention some additional positives. I do think that there are some moments that were emotionally very impactful. I think that one of the last scenes of the game, I think I can mention the boat scene near the end, was very, very, very strong. It was a very good emotional climax to the game, I think. I don't want to say anything more than that, but I think if you think of the scene on the boat near the end of the game, you probably know what I'm referring to. Scenes like that, where there was like really good emotional payoff, that was when the game worked for me. Unfortunately, that was very little of the game. And let me also share another anecdote with you that kind of helps contextualize it a little bit. As of the time I'm recording this, the day before I recorded this yesterday, the day before today is yesterday, go fucking figure. Yesterday, I was actually scrolling Twitter, and I saw a friend of mine who had replied to somebody playing Umineko for the first time, and they were playing through a chapter and mentioned that they had cried like 3 times already in that chapter. And I was like, I thought through the events of that chapter, and I was like, when would you cry in that chapter? I hated that chapter. Like, from start to finish, I just found that chapter really boring. And I'm just sitting there like, clearly something did not work for me with Umineko. Clearly something did not emotionally connect me to that game. and unfortunately just didn't land for me. And I feel bad. I really do. I feel bad because there was a point when I was playing the game as well where I stopped and like I was like, why do people like? I'm not getting it. Like, why do people like this game? I would look for any kind of explanation, and all of the explanations were just like, it's peak. It's the best fiction ever written. It's the best. Like, and it's like, I'm just sitting here like, that is not an answer. Like, you can't say something is good because it is good. Like, that does not answer the question of why you like it. I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm critiquing Umineko fans, because that is not what I want to do. My point is just that I didn't get it. I did not get the appeal of the game. I felt like the emotional moments did work when they came, but there were too few of them that sincerely worked for me to make it work, where there was too much of the game where it felt like things were meandering, where the prose was just kind of not really working for me at all, where the tone was not working for me at all, where there were all of these fight scenes and all of these, again, very superfluous side characters who really didn't do anything for me. I'm going to give Umineko the bottom of C tier. And I think in my heart of hearts, I want to say D tier, but I also don't want to be that. I don't want to like incite that much violence right now. I do think that I admire what it tries to do. I admire like its sense of scale. I admire what it tries to say about fiction, about a lot of the meta elements I do think were interesting, and I give it credit for that. I didn't find a lot of the story, it just didn't really pull me in. It didn't intrigue me, it didn't really hook me. I was kind of bored for a lot of it, unfortunately, and I sincerely apologize to Umineko fans. I really tried to give my most... I tried to flesh out my thoughts as much as I could and tried to justify why my opinion is the way it is. I have some friends who are big Umineko fans, and I feel really bad because there's one friend of mine in particular who has been recommending Umineko to me for years, and I felt I sincerely felt guilty that I didn't enjoy it. Like, I felt like I let him down. So, sorry, Ace. Love you, buddy. Moving on. If you're still with me after that, Danganronpa series. A bunch of kids are locked in a school or island, respectively, and are told to kill each other, and they do. And they have to solve the mysteries. They have to, do the class trials and figure out who the killers are. I'm going to be really quick with these games. I have maintained that Danganronpa is a junk food series. What do I mean by a junk food series? I find that Danganronpa is exciting. I find that, picking your favorite characters and seeing who lives and dies and solving the mysteries and just the intrigue of like, you're about to find a body and you've got to see who it is and see who's still in the game and who's out of the game. It's fun. It's exciting. It's very poppy. If you enjoy the really anime tone, again, that is like the phrase of the day. That unfortunately is not something that appeals to me, but I know some people really do enjoy it tonally. If you enjoy that, you're probably gonna have a blast with it. I actually played all 3 Danganronpas in a really short span. I think I started the series in September, and I played through the 2 mainline games. I played through. I watched the anime. I played Ultra Despair Girls, unfortunately, and then I got V3 in December, and then played that immediately. So I pretty much played the games in the span of like maybe 4 or 5 months total by the time I finished V3. And at the time, I was really, really, really hooked. I was like, these games are awesome. I love these to death. Like, I love all these characters. I love Gundam Tanaka. He's my favorite character in the series. Still is, by the way. He's a really good character. Gundam rules. But by the time I was getting to the end of V3, I think I started noticing the series tropes a little bit more. I started to kind of see how the structure of all 3 games is very similar, how it utilizes kind of similar plot details between the 3. And I could feel myself really burning out. And then after that, I have revisited the series in the form of seeing people stream it a few times since then. It's been a number of years since V3 came out, and since I, had my little Danganronpa extravaganza. I have revisited the series at least a few times since then. I think every time I revisit it, I notice just some things that feel very goofy, some plot details that feel a little bit contrived. I feel like I notice, again, I'm just going to be blunt, with all 3 main plots, it gets kind of dumb and it's like I feel like that's something that even Danganronpa fans will say. Like a lot of Danganronpa fans will tell you, like the main plots of the games are not particularly great. They tend to get very, very big in scale, but be very silly. There might be a few people who like it, and I apologize if so, but not for me. But point is, I just feel like junk food series is just the best way I can put it, because it's like eating candy, where you eat the candy and it's like, oh, that was so good, that was the best damn candy I've ever had. And then maybe you get a little bit sick afterward and you are like, wow, I shouldn't have eaten that candy. And then maybe you get a cavity and you're like, oh fuck, that sucked. You're like, but maybe you still want to eat more candy later in the future, despite the stomach aches and cavities that you get from it, because it's still good, it's still exciting, it's still fun. It's just, there's not a lot of substance to it, and it comes with a lot of drawbacks. That is like the best analogy that I can think of for the series. Within the series, I do think that Danganronpa 1 is my least favorite. I feel like it's just the most simplistic across the board. I feel like it probably has the weakest cast for me as well. Danganronpa V3 and 2 are a lot closer. I find that V3 is a little bit more fleshed out in a lot of ways. A lot of people don't like one of its big twists. Not going to comment on that too much, but I didn't mind it as much as others do. I found that it at least like took some interesting swings, but not going to comment anything beyond that. But I do find that V3 is very polished compared to the other two. But I do think that Danganronpa 2 has the strongest cast of the three games. I will also say, despite Danganronpa ranking a little bit lower on this, like B tier is not even bad. B tier is kind of mixed opinions, or it's okay, whatever. Even though this series is ranking just a little bit lower for me, I do have to point out that at the time of recording this, Danganronpa 2x2 was announced a few months ago, and I found myself sincerely excited for it. I found myself really excited to revisit the Danganronpa 2 cast, to have another like silly killing game and see who lives and dies and do all of that. So it's not like I dislike the series. I just find a lot of its substance to be kind of lacking, where basically once you get into like the final chapter of any Danganronpa game, my interest just completely tanks. And I'm more in it for like the killing game stuff, and that is where the games shine for me. I feel like they do a good job of making these really vivid characters, albeit a little too anime for me at times, but still very memorable casts. And it's fun to see who lives, who dies, where their storylines go, etc. So definitely a series that I do enjoy on some level. I just also have a lot of critiques of the series as well. Hope that makes sense, and I hope I didn't piss people off like I surely did with the Umineko thing from a few minutes ago. Raging Loop. Okay, this is a fun one. Full disclosure, I am just coming off of this game. Like, as of the time I'm recording this, I'm about a week out from having finished it, so my opinions on it are very fresh. That may lead to a little bit of recency bias on my part, but I do think that I kind of know where my thoughts are going to land, so hopefully I'm able to kind of coherently explain it and not give it too much bias either way. But Raging Loop sees you as a traveling biker who ends up crashed in the city of not really city, in the settlement of Yasumizu during the Feast of the Yomi Purge, an event where there are werewolves in the village, and they have to kill each other and, find out who the werewolves are, vote them out, kill the werewolves. If that's not bad enough, he is also in the midst of a time loop, which, gotta say, that's quite the combo. If you are familiar with the party game Werewolf, or Mafia, or whichever. I use Werewolf because obviously it's a little bit more apt for a game about werewolves. If you are familiar with that, this game is very much an adaptation of that. It wears it on its sleeve. It is very openly trying to be a visual novel version of that party game. If there's one thing I went into Raging Loop knowing, it's that the ending is very, very it's very, very disliked. I had literally the only opinion of the game that I had seen is that the ending ruins the game. And so I approached it from a very wary perspective. I was like, let's just, I got it. I saw it on an eShop sale for $3. Let's just try it. Let's just see where this goes. If I hate it, what the fuck ever. It's $3. You literally can't even go to like McDonald's for $3 these days. Like, it's gotten so high that like $3 is nothing. I loved it. I loved Raging Loop. genuinely had a fucking blast with it. I felt like I would divide the game into two parts. The first, maybe 4/5 of the game, is some of the best VNing I have experienced. Genuinely. I genuinely would count this among one of the best VNs I've ever played for the first 4/5. The last fifth of the game is where the ending kind of comes in. And I just want to get this out of the way first, because it is kind of the elephant in the room. There are two components to the ending that are disliked. There's a twist that people don't really like. I find myself kind of between neutral and dislike on it. I didn't hate it, but I don't like it either. And also the pacing gets really bad. I can't defend that. I cannot defend how bad the pacing gets in the end. The game just kind of like info dumps on you. Like it just kind of starts like throwing info at you, and you're just expected to be like, okay, here's all of this plot. Here's like, there are scenes that literally go on for like an hour or more, and it's literally just the game chucking plot at you left and right. And it's like, okay, can you like pace yourself a little bit? I'm not gonna go into detail, but if you know the game, there's that scene. There's like actually a CG with it, where the main character and another character, and they're at a desk like doing research about something for the main plot. And that scene is like excruciating to play. I can't defend that ending. But let me double back to the first 4/5 that I had mentioned. That is where you're doing all of this killing game stuff, and the game just maintains this awesome sense of tension, and it always feels like there are stakes. It always feels like the game is throwing curveballs at you to keep you guessing. Like, I felt like every time I was kind of getting into a routine with the game would throw something at me to really be like, oh fuck, where is this gonna go? Like, I want to see where this goes. I want to see where this, I want to see what happens. I actually, this is funny. So I mentioned I got the game on Switch. I was playing in handheld mode in bed. I would play it for maybe like 30 to 40 minutes. 30 to 40 minutes a day in bed would be my plan. What I found was that there were numerous times when I would be playing and I would look at the clock and be like, oh fuck, it's an hour past my bedtime. And like, I would like look back at my Switch and be like, I want to keep going though. I want to see what happens next. Like, I want to see who dies. I want to see who lives. I want to see where this plot point goes. Like, I was just so hooked. Like, to a degree that it's been a while since I've been that hooked on anything, like on any kind of story, and I was just so intrigued. I also think that the characters are just absolutely top notch. I think of a game like this with like kind of a core cast that's more or less fixed, with the same group of characters the entire game like this, and not like an Ace Attorney where it's like rotating in and out, if you know what I mean. I think of that type of game, I think this is one of the best casts of characters that I can remember. In the entire cast, I would say there's one character who I think really didn't get much in the story at all, and that is probably the weakest character. I think that about 60 to 70% of them are somewhere between good and just excellent for me. I found a lot of them to be really multifaceted, really interesting characters, like very vivid without feeling too over the top. I guess I'll list a few of my favorites. Takumi, Mamiya, and Mochi are some of my favorites. I found Haruaki to be a very fun protagonist. I found Kiyanosuke to be very well written. I'm trying to think of everybody. Genuinely, let me just cut to the chase. I really think that the weakest characters are just the ones that didn't really have too much of a role. I felt like everybody else had... Their relationships were very fleshed out. Their perspective was very fleshed out. I felt like I always knew where they were coming from. I felt like they were always very consistent with their perspective on the killing game. And like, how to put it? I felt like, you had characters who were like the elder characters who were more by the books, who wanted to follow the rule books. You had like the younger characters who didn't really care about the rules, who were more, open to just doing whatever. There was a wild card type character in there. There's like an outsider to the village who's like using more of a modernized, rational perspective. I felt like every character had a slightly different perspective that they brought to the game, and they were all utilized very, very well. Genuinely, again, that first 4/5 of the game is just... if the game had maintained that, I would honestly consider putting it in my SS tier. I was so just hooked on the game. If I just took the last 1/5, I would say maybe like the B tier-ish. Like, it wasn't even that bad. It was just not very good. Taken as a whole, I feel like it is yet another addition to my giant, massive S tier games. I don't know. I feel like I have a tough time putting it either above or below Emio because I feel like they both do very different things and they both do them very, very well. But they're both excellent games, so can't go wrong with either one of them. I'm just gonna put it below it just because I don't want to like take something that I just played and put it like super, super high up whenever like I might look back on it in a few months and be like, oh, well, maybe that wasn't as good as I thought. But I really loved it. I think it's a very easy recommend, but I do think, you know, I do have to caution about the entire ending sequence. I think that there is a sincere argument for, like, the game makes it pretty clear, honestly, when you are nearing the end and you're getting to that point in the game where you're just kind of doing like the main plot stuff, there's an argument for just stopping the game there and maybe like looking up a plot summary to like read the rest. I do also want to note, I think it's important to note, there is actually a secondary mode in the game called Revelation Mode, where you can play through the game again and hear other characters' thoughts and get additional scenes that would have spoiled things if you had seen them the first time. I've heard that actually rounds out the main plot very, very well. I've heard that it kind of helped a lot of people who hated the ending to be more okay with it. I haven't done it yet. I've been kind of going back and forth on if I want to do it right now or not, because I feel like even though you can skip a lot of the old scenes, I feel like just like reapproaching the entire game right after I beat it is a little bit of a tough ask, but I do feel like I should note that in regards to the ending, that there is kind of a mode that allegedly fixes a lot of issues with it, even if I haven't personally approached it yet. So hopefully that makes it even better, even though I already enjoyed the hell out of the game. And I do also just want to say, if you're one of those people who says that the ending ruined the game for you, that is valid. Like, don't get me wrong, I totally get it if you think that the ending was that bad. I just don't. I think that the ending was like, if I rated the first major chunk of the game, I would give it like a 9.5 out of 10. And the ending sequence for me was like maybe between a 6 and a 7. Like, it was just kind of there. It was a little bit on the mediocre side for me, but it was fine. So if you really hated the ending that much, you're so valid. It's just it wasn't that bad for me personally. 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. I can't even begin to describe this game. Let me think. You play as a bunch of students who are fighting some kind of monsters in mechs, and figuring out anything more than that is kind of part of the central mystery of the game, so that's about all I can say. This game is kind of split between being visual novel and real-time strategy. I've seen people really, really hate the RTS component to the game and say that it like ruins it. If I'm being honest, I found the RTS side of it to be just like the most like just there thing I've ever seen. Like, it's like just something that you're forced to do every now and then, and it's like it exists, and I'm just like, okay, that was whatever, sure. But for the purposes of this list, I am much more interested in talking about the visual novel side, which I kind of found to be a little bit overrated, if I'm being totally honest. I went into this with high hopes. I had heard very good things about it. I had seen, the sprite work, which is absolutely immaculate. I'm not going to disparage the sprites at all. They are very pretty. Vanillaware does an excellent job with sprites in general. This is kind of like reverse Raging Loop for me in a weird way, where I was very, very intrigued in the first chunk of the game, and then it dropped off. Where this becomes the reverse is that, unlike Raging Loop, I actually did find that the ending kind of ruined the game for me. How to put this? There was a lot of time being spent on setting up a lot of mysteries, like so many mysteries. Like I had the fucking conspiracy board out, and I was like, that, the meme with the, I think it's from It's Always Sunny, with like all of the things connected, and I think it's like I may be like totally gaslighting myself, but I believe it's Charlie pointing to the board and like all this conspiracy shit, right? That was me with 13 Sentinels, where I was like, well, how does this connect? How does this all go? Like, I was like, my brain was just constantly turning and working, and I was so intrigued. And I just felt like, as I got toward the end, a lot of mysteries just kind of fizzled out for me, where I was like, oh, was that all? Okay, sure, I guess. It's unfortunate, because I was really into the game, and then I felt like just more and more, I could feel my interest in it dropping off as I got toward the finish line. And there is a particular twist that I didn't care for. I felt like it really worked against the game in a way that it shouldn't have, but it did for me. I will be fair and say that there are other twists that did work, but there is one in particular that really did not work for me personally, and I can't obviously elaborate on that in my not spoiler territory, but suffice to say, there were also a few characters who I felt like were set up to be really big deals, and then I played through their storylines and saw their whole thing and was like, oh, you aren't really as interesting as I thought you were, and I was like, that's kind of disappointing. So I do have to knock the game a little bit personally, and let me be fair, I know some people who love the shit out of this game. I know some people who have it among their favorite VNs ever. I know some people who anytime I bring up these critiques that I have, they'll be like, nope, you're wrong. One of my best friends that I talk to every single day, every time 13 Sentinels comes up, I mention this, and he's like, nope, you're wrong. You're wrong. The twists are fine. Everything was good. This game fucking rules. You're just wrong. And I'm like, okay, fuck me, I guess. But for me personally, I am going to put it in B tier. I think that the journey of the game was very good. I think that it did set up a lot of intrigue. I will also say the cast is very strong. I don't remember how many playable characters there are offhand. I think it was, dipshit dots. 13, I think, is the number with, it being in the title and all. Let's go with 13, and because that is the universe's most obvious number to say here. I believe there's 13 characters. I would say of those, I enjoyed probably 8 or 9, and then the rest I found to be either boring or a little bit annoying, if I'm being honest, but I felt like the characters I enjoyed were very strong. Again, I can't diminish the fact that I was really, really hooked on the mysteries, and I really enjoyed theorizing and just trying to figure out how it all connected, but it just, how it resolved itself did not work for me personally, unfortunately, and that did tank my opinion of the game a little bit. So again, it's funny to I actually did not do this on purpose, but it is funny to discuss this right after Raging Loop, because that is a problem that a lot of people have with Raging Loop that I explicitly didn't have, but I did have it with 13 Sentinels. And again, if you want me to elaborate on that, please reach out. I would be happy to expand on that thought, because I feel like there's a lot that I could talk about that would veer a little bit too far into spoiler territory, so I can't say it here. Next up is probably the most egregious pick on this list. It's Mouthwashing. Mouthwashing tells the story of a delivery spaceship that crashes due to unknown circumstances. And the story picks up both before and after the crash, and kind of tells the story leading up to the crash, as well as getting into some of the details following it as both morale and supplies start to dwindle. So let me be clear out of the gate. This is not a visual novel. I don't think anybody considers this a visual novel. I don't think anybody would put this on this list. I think this is the type of game that somebody would take a look at my video and see this on the list and then be like, wow, you're an idiot. This isn't a VN. Why is this here? And then they would maybe leave a dislike and then not watch the list and not see me explain this. So to them, I would say thank you, because a dislike is still interaction for the algorithm, and I do appreciate that. So thanks, hypothetical person. But I think Mouthwashing is generally, I kind of see it referred to as a walking simulator. There is some light puzzle solving involved, but it is not typically considered a VN. With that said, I do think that it carries the spirit of a VN in that the narrative is very much the focus. Nobody is buying or playing Mouthwashing to walk around the ship and maybe solve a puzzle every 10 to 20 minutes. So because of that, and honestly just because I really like the game, I decided to just toss it on the list and talk about it. So here we are. I hope that's okay. So Mouthwashing is a really short experience. It is about 3 to 3.5 hours, depending on how long some segments take you. I think it took me about 3.5 hours, but I got kind of stuck on one section because I just really, really sucked at it. But typically I see it a little bit closer to 3 hours. It is a very easy game to stream because of that. I have seen it very easily streamed in one session, very easy to play in one session. You can sit down, beat it in one session, maybe two if you're, don't want to spend 3 whole hours on it. But in that time, I really do think that it tells a super effective story. Like, I'm not going to disparage other games just to prop mouthwashing up. I feel like that is just not very productive. With that said, I can think of games that go for much longer. I can think of games that are 20, 30, 40 hours and don't tell as effective of a story as mouthwashing does in a 3-hour span. Like, it is very, very good at telling a very strong story that really stuck with me a lot. And that is why I wanted to include it on this list, because the story really did stick with me. Like, I beat it and I was like, wow, that really got me thinking. Like, that was a really cool story. I really didn't expect this to go in this direction at all. Like, there were so many different things that, like, I thought I had a lot of things figured out, and it really did swerve me a lot of times. So I really have to give it a lot of credit for that, especially, again, in a really short span. One thing that mouthwashing is just absolutely superb at is using a lot of little details to tell a really good story, where there are a lot of, like, character movements and character interactions and little tiny throwaway pieces of dialogue and the way things are placed in the environment even. All of that is utilized to tell the story very, very well. And I really have to give it, I really have to commend the game highly for that, because that is such a cool way to tell a story. Like, I do think that because of that, there is a lot that really rewards a replay or a rewatch. I actually, by pure chance, a channel that I really like, Dead Meat, happened to be streaming it a few weeks after I beat the game, and I rewatched it during that time, and I really felt like it rewarded that a lot, because I caught a lot of details that I didn't on the first run, and it's really cool. Like, it really, genuinely, I have to give the game a lot of credit for just placing a lot of things seemingly very innocuously, and you can really read into them, you can, like, make theories about them, you can analyze them very closely, and it's very cool that the game is so well thought out, and I really have to give it a lot of credit for that. I also think that its cast is very strong. It's a cast of about 5 characters, and every single one of them is very, very interesting, well-rounded. Again, I hate to I hate to use exactly the same terminology that I just used a few moments ago, but there's a lot that you can read into and analyze with them. I feel like with every single character, you can kind of interpret a lot of their actions different ways. I have seen general consensus opinions on all of them, and I think a lot of people have kind of gotten to the core of what they were really intending for each one, but I still think that there is a lot of room to, like, really, if you want to read them as more negative or more well-meaning, you can absolutely do so, and I think that that's really cool. I feel like it's really interesting that there's a lot for each character that's left unsaid, and that you can kind of fill in the blanks and kind of, again, use context clues, use, like, environmental clues to really piece together what they were really after or what they were really trying to do. And I realized that that is exactly the same thing. I realized that I pretty much said the exact same thing twice, so good job, Dodds. Suffice to say, I feel like all of the characters were super well written, and the main narrative was super engaging and well written, and, like, I have to give that a lot of credit. Like, for such a short game, it really did stick with me so hard. So while it isn't a visual novel, and while I think that a lot of people would probably, like, explicitly get angry with me for even including it on this list, which to them I just apologize, I do think that I think it's worth a play for VN fans. I really, really do. It's cheap, it's like $12, it's very short, and I truly think that it tells a really good story. I think that it's a really good game where if you've got friends who have played it, it's really fun to just kind of compare notes and talk about theories and talk about, what you noticed, what maybe they noticed if they haven't, like, already read everything on the Reddit and, like, seen all of the, like, pretty much all of the information is, like, laid out by now, but still, I had a lot of fun with that. I had a lot of fun just kind of analyzing things, and I think that that's a really cool part of the game. So, one other thing I really have to credit the game for, there is a lot of really good horror to it, which I always appreciate. As I kind of alluded to with Paranormasight, that is kind of something that I really like in VNs, and that I don't see enough of in VNs. And while I do think that it isn't, like, as scary as maybe it kind of tries to be at times. I think that there are a few things where it's like, if you know the conventions of a horror game, you kind of know where some of these things are going, and so it's not quite as scary as maybe it could have been. I do have to give it props for that. I really appreciated that aspect. If you're a VN fan who doesn't really touch other genres too much, you may have overlooked Mouthwashing. I, again, feel like most people would consider it a walking simulator or a puzzle game, and so you may have just not really given it a second look. And if that is your case, I truly do recommend it. I think that it's worth a look. I think that it is, at least in the general sphere of VNs, to where the story is the draw, and you are very much there for the writing. So definitely recommend giving it a look. And while it may be egregious to even include it at all, I am giving it yet another S tier, which again is probably a lot of games by now, but cut me some slack. I like a lot of these games. Time Hollow. Okay, so I want to be really upfront about this one. It has been a very long time since I played Time Hollow. The game was released, I don't even remember how long ago now, but it was on the original DS. I played it when it was new, have not played it since, have not really even thought about it since, so my memory is very spotty of it, but I kind of gave myself a very, very vague refresher by looking at a plot synopsis, so hopefully that helps. But you play as Ethan Kairos, a high school student who gets Mandela affected to hell and back when he wakes up and finds out that everybody tells him that his parents have been dead for years when he does not remember that at all. He is kind of tasked with fixing the timeline by using his time pen to make little circles and basically mend the timeline. This game is very comparable to Ghost Trick, I think, where I feel like it is much more about solving the puzzles for a lot of the game, and it's much more about all of these kind of what you can do with this pen that can change timelines. You are using that to investigate things, to solve puzzles, to fix little smaller issues, stuff like that. From what I recall, I remember the plot being kind of, again, like Ghost Trick, kind of backloaded, where you're just doing puzzle stuff for a while, and then you get all of this plot at the end, and it's oh, okay, here's this twist, and this twist, and this twist. And again, I might be wrong about that. That is just what I recall. But what I do recall is that the plot is very solid. I do remember a lot of the twists. I obviously can't say them here, but I think that the twists were strong for what the game was. I think that it kind of benefited from the fact that I went into it knowing nothing about it. I went into it just totally just idly curious about what this is and having never heard anything about it. And I've almost never heard anybody talk about it since, so, it's obviously not the most prolific VN out there, but I remember just thinking it was this casual, silly puzzle game where you mess with time, and then I remember getting through the plot twists and being hey, this was a lot darker than I expected, and this plot was a lot deeper than I expected. I actually really dig this. That is about all I can say, both due to my memory and not wanting to spoil anything. Yeah, I apologize for the vagueness of this entry, and I apologize for just kind of slapping it in C tier and calling it a day, but I just remember liking the game. I remember finding it to be a little bit better than I thought it would be, but I remember it hasn't stuck in my memory. And let me also be clear, there are games that I have played much further back than Time Hollow. There are games that I played when I was really young on the PS1, where I remember the plot more firmly than Time Hollow. And I do think that kind of works against the game a little bit, that I did forget a lot of the plot details in that time, even though it has been a while. So I'm not going to criticize it harshly. I remember it being a very decent game, just I don't know that I would put it any higher than this from what I recall of it. So sorry if you're a big Time Hollow fan. Last, maybe least, maybe not least, the 100 line. Last Defense Academy. By release date, this is the newest game on the list. It was released earlier this year as of the time of recording this. You play as Takumi Sumino, a interesting character, I guess, who is tasked along with other high school students to defend a school against the mysterious invaders. And they are supposed to last for 100 days. The game boasts 100 different endings that go 100 in-game days. That is a major point of its marketing, and I feel like it is both a blessing and a curse for the game, if I'm being honest. I give the game a lot of credit for its ambition. I do. 100 endings, and I do think that calling it a game with 100 endings is mostly true. The game does kind of cheat. There's a route where they kind of just like slap on like 10 different endings that are all like the same damn thing, and it's like very clearly just there to pad out the ending count because they really wanted to hit that 100 number. But for the most part, and I do think that the game is mostly telling the truth when it says it has 100 endings, but because there is that much to the game, there is going to be a wide variety of quality. There are endings that are very, 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 very good. The very first ending that I got, by pure raw coincidence, was actually the ending that is usually considered one of the best and the most like story informative of all of them. That ending, it was excellent. That was like S tier V ending for me. That would if that was the only route in the game, ironically, I would probably put this game in S tier. There are also routes and endings that I would, for lack of a better term, I would call slop. I think that there are routes that just feel, they have the cadence of like an anime filler arc, where they just feel like they're very silly, goofy, kind of poorly written at times, just sort of there to take up space in a lot of ways. And I kind of feel like when I look at, full disclosure, I guess, I want to be like very clear on this. I have not cleared all 100 endings on 100 line. I believe I played the game for about 3 months on and off. I got to around 40 something endings and kind of just burnt out on the game really, really hard, and just kind of like, I have to stop. I will try to pick this back up in the future, but I have not seen everything. From what I have seen, I feel like I would qualify about 70% of what I played as a little bit not very good, and then 30% as, or maybe like 20% as really, really good, like genuinely good, and then 10% as excellent, like super, super top tier ending. Because there are so many different routes, and because there are so many, there's a lot of time to fill, that also does lead to a really wide variety of content. What I mean by that is, like, it kind of feels like anything can happen, basically. Like, you can have routes that are silly, lighthearted fun. You can have really dramatic routes. You can have routes that get into, like, horror. You can have routes that really deal with emotional payoff from certain things. You can have routes that kind of ignore any emotional stakes and just do whatever the fuck they want and have these wacky, silly adventures. The rules of the world are kind of nebulous and allow you to do pretty much anything you want. And I do think that generally kind of works for the game's credit. I think that just going into the game and not knowing what to expect and seeing where the fuck it goes is really fun. Like, I liked just kind of picking choices arbitrarily and just seeing where they ended up. What I also will say, I do kind of have, this is something that is admittedly kind of cheating in that it's taking knowledge that I've gained from others. But from what I experienced and from what I've heard from others, I do have to levy one pretty big critique of the game. For as much content as it has, and I believe that it actually is by volume the like most dense VN at this point. I think that it has like the most text of any when you take like all of the text together. For as long as it is, I felt like there were characters in the main cast who really did not get much. And again, I'm also taking the fact that I've heard this from others, like who have actually done all of the routes, to kind of inform that opinion as well. So I apologize that it's not strictly based on my own experience, but there were characters that I felt like I really wanted to see more development from. I wanted to see get some bigger moments. I wanted to see, just get more involvement in the plot, and they just never did. And it's like, when you have that much content in the game, surely you can spare some room for these characters who are like ostensibly of the main cast, but aren't really doing anything. I guess I should also say there is a strategy component to this, like a gameplay, like SRPG element. It's fine. If you're a strategy game fan, and obviously I'm a strategy game fan considering that my channel is like all about Fire Emblem, I play a lot of strategy games. If you see this game as just a strategy game and pick it up for that, like, or if you are interested in picking the game up for that element, I should say, don't. Do not buy this game to be a strategy game. Seriously, just don't. the game kind of works as more of like a puzzle game, in my opinion, where it becomes more about just like solving maps in one turn. Like there's almost no like long-term positioning or anything like that. I feel like the game actively punishes you for like longer-term strategies. So I feel like as a strategy game, it's fine, but it's like it's broken enough that like I can't really recommend it to anybody on that front. But okay, so I had this is a point that I kind of am I'm awkwardly inserting it here because I had forgotten to mention it. I had mentioned earlier how the rules of the world are very nebulous, and that allows for a really wide variety of content, right? That was something that I listed as a pro to the game. What I will say is that I did find the game was often a little bit inconsistent, where there were routes where like there were certain plot elements that just did not work the same as they did in other routes, and that led to things feeling a little bit inconsistent. And like I can't really say it without spoiling anything, but there's like a specific machine in the game that serves this function that is like tied in with the gameplay. And there are routes where it just kind of spontaneous, like it just doesn't do what it's supposed to do in the story. And that really like it bugged me. It bugged me that the game was kind of internally inconsistent at times. And I do think that also it also kind of comes from the fact that there were several writers who contributed to the game. I believe that there were, I don't actually know the number, but there were several writers who wrote like various routes in the game, and you can kind of tell when there are things that, when like, there are characters who start acting very differently when you get on certain routes, and there are certain elements in the plot that just don't seem to function the same from route to route, and that inconsistency did kind of bother me. But I don't want to just strictly critique the game, because I will say it's ambitious. Even the routes that, again, I would call slop, which sounds very loaded, but I feel like that is the most apt term that I can think of. Even those routes, they do have their charm to them, where I was genuinely like enjoying the cast and its shenanigans. One other major critique I do have with the game. Yeah, this is something that I should have mentioned at the beginning. I apologize. It is 4:40 a.m. and I've been recording for 3 hours. My brain is mush at this point, so this is saving this game for last was not the best idea I've ever had. But one other element that I wanted to mention. So the 100-day thing is kind of a blessing and a curse for the game, where it does lead to a lot of content. Yes, it does lead to a lot of scenarios that can be kind of fleshed out and expanded upon, but there are also a lot of times when the game's pacing just fucking tanks. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, that sounds harsh, but I think that is how I would describe it. There are just times when the game is just blatantly padding itself out, where it's like, nothing is happening today. Here's free time. Okay, now you've spent the day doing like random gameplay micromanagement things. Next day, oh, nothing's happening. Free time. Oh, nothing's happening the next day either. Free time. Even worse, there are times when the game just finds really arbitrary ways to introduce time skips, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden a random rock from nowhere has hit Takumi Sumino in the head. He is now unconscious for 2.5 months. We're skipping that many days. That's not literally a thing that happens in the game, but it does often feel like that same kind of energy, where it's like, okay, yeah, the game really did not have enough content to fill 100 days on this path. I can see that quite clearly. Probably should have just not done that, but sure. I did unfortunately feel like the 100-day thing did work against the game in a lot of ways, and that's actually specifically why I burnt out on the game and stopped playing it. I had done a route that was really, 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 really heavy on free time, and where there wasn't really much content going on. It was just really boring, if I'm being totally blunt. And then I did another route that was, it was a lot better. Like, the writing was a lot stronger, there was a lot more going on, but there was still a lot more free time. And both routes went all the way to 100 days, so they were both quite long. And then I finished that latter one out, and I looked at the flowchart to like decide if I wanted, like, it's like, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? Like, what choice do I want to explore? And I was like, the thought of starting up another route right now makes me like physically ill. Like, I can't do it. I another route where it's just day after day of free time and you're padding and you're just trying to get through it so you can see more of the plot. I cannot do it right now. So that was a lot of criticisms of the game. That was me being a little bit harsh. But I will say, again, there are times when the game has a lot of emotional weight to it, where the game explores some really interesting concepts, where the game utilizes its interesting cast in good ways. There are times when, you know, even the routes that I find poorly written were still very entertaining and fun. There are times when even these silly routes with absolutely nothing happening, where the plot is almost completely out the window, were still like some fun writing. There's a kind of silly route. I'm not going to name it just in case anybody doesn't want to hear the route names, but there is a route that is explicitly very silly, and that route made me laugh several times. Like, I was like, oh wow, this is actually a really fun route. Okay, cool. Even though I didn't really enjoy some of the pacing to it, I still think that, yeah, I think that it does have some very strong characters. I think that most of its characters get at least a few big story moments, and that's worth noting. So where do I tier this? That is the question of the day, I think. I think that its best moments, and I would particularly point to that ending that I got first, that I really enjoyed. I would put its best moments in lower S tier, like the very, very bottom, like probably around Somnium to Azron Legacy. Like, that's about as high as I'll go. Its worst moments I would probably put in C. I don't think that it, like, I think that it very rarely gets egregiously bad to the point where it's like, this is just unplayable garbage. I think that the worst it gets is just where it's kind of boring and feels very padded out and like there's a lot of filler. I think I am going to take the ambition of the game and the scale of the game and give it a little bit of credit and put it at the very bottom of A tier, because I do think that making a game that has that much content, that has that many routes, that has that much like varied, like there are a lot of varied story beats, there are a lot there's like just a lot of different directions that it goes in, there's a lot of wacky stuff that happens, and it is interesting to just see where it goes. I think I would credit that enough to put it in at the bottom of A tier, even if I do feel like the game very often slips into being more of a B tier, sometimes even a C tier for me. Not a D tier. Nothing is Layton's Mystery Journey bad. Like, very few games I have ever played in my life are Layton's Mystery Journey bad. I do not like that game. But yeah, I think 100 Line, I think A is about right for it when I take the fact that I respect the game and that I played it for quite a while and still have a ton of content left and have generally had a pretty good time with it. I think that feels about right to me. Oh, what's this? A new game has suddenly appeared out of nowhere over 2 hours into this video. Wild. This one needs some explanation, I think. So as I alluded to several times throughout the video, I recorded this in early to mid-November, and at the time I recorded this, I had fully intended to release the video a few weeks after, maybe like late November to early December. I knew it was going to be like a gargantuan task to edit this thing. 2 or 3 days after I recorded this, I had a really, really bad thing happened in my personal life, and I'm not going to go into too many details. I don't think anybody needs to hear that in my visual novel tier list. Suffice to say, I had a major mental health crash, and I could not even think about editing this thing. Like, every time I thought about it, I was like, I just can't. I don't have the energy for this. Like, I'm not in a headspace where I can sit down and edit this thing. So, unfortunately, this kind of sat on my hard drive for like a month and a half. I didn't even start like actually editing it until like very, very late December. In the meantime, I played The Last Window, the sequel to Hotel Dusk, for a game club, and I wasn't going to include it, but when I got to the editing process, by the time I was like nearly ready to finalize the video in early mid January, I kind of realized that there were a handful of sections where my audio wasn't quite good enough, where I didn't really expand upon my thoughts meaningfully enough that I thought that like it made any amount of sense. So I had to go back, sit down, and re-record a few segments, and I was like, you know what, I'm re-recording anyway, I'm going to like splice those into the video. Let me add The Last Window, because I have now played it, and I want this to be as comprehensive as physically possible. So, here we are. If that makes any amount of sense. I apologize for the little tangent this long into the video, but so The Last Window. Hotel Dusk sequel. This game sees Kyle Hyde as he is tasked with finding the Scarlet Star, an item that went missing years before and is allegedly hidden somewhere in his apartment building. So, this is an interesting one, because I feel like ostensibly it is very much Hotel Dusk Part 2, where it is like just more Hotel Dusk. Like that, like initially whenever I started playing it, I was like, this is just more Hotel Dusk. If I were to tier it, it would be exactly where Hotel Dusk is. And then I kind of started noticing that there are a lot of differences. There are a lot of things that I would explicitly call attention to that are very different between the two games. I think that The Last Window it's kind of higher highs and lower lows for sure for me, where I feel like there are a lot of explicit flaws that I had with it, but a lot of things that it very explicitly did better than Hotel Dusk. So like, I'm kind of like in real time deciding where I want to tier this, because I have no idea. Okay, so I think that The Last Window has a much stronger central narrative and a much stronger like engaging mystery than Hotel Dusk did, where I felt like Hotel Dusk was more about just seeing where things go. Like, you're kind of exploring, you're seeing like these problems pop up with the hotel residents, and then you're solving them, and then like you're seeing how these gradually come together. Whereas The Last Window very much sets up a lot of initial mysteries, and you kind of know where the plot is going to go from early on, right? That is very much a strength of The Last Window, I find. Like, I feel like having that centralized narrative already ready to go made me more engaged with it, and made me like a little bit more like interested in solving everything, instead of like Hotel Dusk. I was like, you know, I'm just kind of enjoying the ride, I'm just enjoying the vibe. With that said, I do think that The Last Window had a little bit of trouble utilizing some of its characters. In Hotel Dusk, I felt like every single character was used very, very well, and I felt like they all kind of had a role to play. I felt like they all connected very well. It was like this intricate web of characters that really came together very, very nicely for me. Whereas in The Last Window, there are definitely several characters that I'm like, why were you here exactly? Like, I don't really see why you were in this game. And to be fair, it does make sense. When you get into the plots of those games, there is kind of like a reason why all the characters were there in Hotel Dusk versus The Last Window is just kind of people who happen to live together for the most part. So it does, like, I'm not gonna like bash the game too heavily for that, but I do think it is worth pointing out. Kind of a really trivial flaw that this is gonna just sound like more of a nitpick than anything, but I do want to point it out. It's really weird. It's like such a specific issue, but it is an issue that I had with it. Okay, so in Hotel Dusk, you were in a singular fixed location over the course of one night. You had one night to figure everything out, piece all of these mysteries together, and solve everything. In The Last Window, you are over the course of like maybe a week, and you're in an apartment that you're constantly coming and going from. There are a lot of segments where Kyle, like, you know, just kind of goes out and wanders around. It's like, okay, cool. I actually had an issue with that. And this is, I really hate to even point out, because it really does. It sounds like a huge nitpick, right? But I felt like the fact that you could come and go, and the fact that it was like just so spread out made the atmosphere kind of fall off for me a little bit, where I never felt that inherent sense of tension that I did with Hotel Dusk. Like Hotel Dusk, I always felt like there was such a thing of like, you know, what's around the corner, and like what's next? Like, we've got to solve this mystery, and like, how is this all going to come together in this short amount of time? And then The Last Window, it just felt a little bit more like meandering to me, where it was more like, okay, we're just kind of doing this now, we're going to the diner, we're just gonna kind of, okay, Kyle's gonna go out shopping, and you know, it never had that sense of urgency that Hotel Dusk did for me, and that did kind of hurt it a little bit. But I do think that The Last Window has a lot of really, really good moments. I think that some of its best moments easily trump some of Hotel Dusk's. Like, there were some moments where I was like, my jaw was like dropping. I was like, oh, okay, we're going there. Okay, cool. Like, that is really intense. I do also think that it does a better job of characterizing Kyle Hyde amusingly. In Hotel Dusk, Kyle Hyde is kind of more of a secondary character despite being the main character, if that makes sense, where it's like he's driving the action, but it also isn't necessarily about him, whereas The Last Window really takes the time to focus more on Kyle as a character, and it's kind of interesting. In Hotel Dusk, I always saw Kyle as like super put together and, you know, just this cool bad boy, and then you play The Last Window and you like see his apartment and he's like 5 minutes into the game he loses his job and he's like, his refrigerator is like a few pieces of fruit and like some pickles, and like he's lamenting the fact that he doesn't have any mayonnaise, and it's like, oh, he's kind of a train wreck, isn't he? Like, okay, I see now. And it was really interesting characterization. I don't know if I would call it a retcon or just further exploring him and going in a different direction with him, but it was interesting just to see it. But I think pound for pound, I liked Hotel Dusk a little bit better. I felt like the atmosphere was a lot stronger for me. I felt like the cast was better utilized and I was more engaged with them. But I do feel like they're similar enough that I would probably put them pretty close. I'm going to put it this right here. I'm going to put it with the Somnium files between them. And I don't know if I'm going to actually include this in the video because like I feel like it comes together very awkwardly, where it's like I have my conclusion already and it doesn't address that. But if I do include that, then now you know how I feel about The Last Window. And now back to what I said 2 months ago in my conclusion, right? So that is my tier list. I hope that I can edit this down because I had intended for this to be like maybe an hour, and I am really like I'm creeping up on the 3-hour mark, so a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. I don't know that I'm going to release this for sure, but hopefully I do, because I have somewhere on my hard drive, I have I think like 14-ish hours of me tiering every character in the Ace Attorney series and talking about them that I recorded for months across like January to I think mid-March of 2025, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna release this video, and then I got to the end and I'm like, nobody is going to watch this. This is terrible. Like, why did I record all of this footage? And then I just did nothing with it, and I have no intention of releasing that footage like at all. So hopefully this footage fares better, but I just wanted to talk about games that I really enjoy. Obviously, there are a lot of S tiers. That is because I really enjoyed a lot of these games. They connected with me either emotionally, or I found their story strong, or I just enjoyed their gameplay and their characters and found them charming. Seriously, I would say I have gotten at least some enjoyment out of everything on this list above Umineko, which again, probably should be D tier, but I really want to be kind to it and respect the ambition that it has and the scale that it has and some of the ideas that it has. But when I'm speaking for my own personal enjoyment, I will be blunt, and it is more of a D tier for me. But, you know, everything else, I think I got at least some amount of enjoyment out of to varying degrees. And I hope I was fair to these games. I hope I didn't give them too much credit. I didn't like glaze some of them too much, like Fata, which I think I just kind of like said, like, this is the best game ever, go play it. I hope that I was able to coherently expand upon my thoughts in a way that made any amount of sense, because I feel like, especially in the last like 30 to 40 minutes, I feel like I've just been like rambling and like my brain has just totally shut off a while ago, because again, it is closing in very rapidly on 5 a.m. So I am getting a little bit tired. But if you've watched all the way to the end, if you have gotten some amount of enjoyment out of it, maybe you found some games that you were interested in. Also, if you have any genuinely, I hope you enjoyed it. But I kind of had a secondary thought in the middle of that. If you have any recommendations for me that aren't on this list that you think I might enjoy, that are like along these lines, like obviously this is like a mystery like storyline kind of tier list. Clearly, I'm not the biggest fan of like the romance type VNs, like hentai, etc. Again, not disparaging anybody who is, but just not for me. But if you have any recommendations that fit into this general like sphere that I haven't played, please drop them. I would love to find more. Like, seriously, the one problem that I have with this genre is that I always feel like there aren't enough games in it, and I'm always like looking for more. And so super open to recommendations, super eager to hear more, super eager to play more. And I hope that you can maybe find some recommendations for yourself on this list, or that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on games that you have played if you've played all of them. And I hope that you just enjoyed hearing me talk about them. I'm sure Umineko fans are looking up my address to pipe bomb me right now. So please don't do that, but I expect it. So just a huge thank you if you've watched this far and I actually released this video. That means a lot. I really wanted to talk about these games that I really enjoy a lot. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your, support in that avenue. And again, really hope that it was enjoyable in some capacity. So thank you so much again. Have a great day.